The judge's gavel came down like a guillotine blade, and just like that, I lost everything I'd spent 15 years building. The property at 847 Willow Creek Drive is hereby awarded to the petitioner, Mr. Nathaniel Crane, Judge Pemberton announced, her voice echoing through the courtroom with the finality of a closing tomb. Mrs. Crane, pardon me, Miss Winters, will have 30 days to vacate the premises. I sat perfectly still in my chair, hands folded in my lap like I was at a pleasant luncheon rather than watching my life be dismantled piece by legal piece. My lawyer Anthony touched my arm gently, a gesture of sympathy I neither wanted nor needed. Across the aisle, Nathaniel couldn't contain his smile. It spread across his face like oil on water, slick and contaminating. Next to him sat Vanessa. 26 years old, blonde, with the kind of figure that came from personal trainers and cosmetic enhancement rather than genetics. She wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment used to be. Her hand rested possessively on Nathaniel's arm, a diamond engagement ring catching the fluorescent courtroom lights. The same lights that made everyone else look washed out and tired made her somehow glow. She leaned into Nathaniel and whispered something. He laughed, actually laughed, right there in the courtroom where our marriage of 15 years had just been legally dissolved, where I'd just lost the house I'd decorated room by room, the garden I'd planted with my own hands, the home where I'd thought we'd grow old together. "All rise," the bailiff called. I stood, my movements controlled and graceful despite the way my knees wanted to buckle. I'd worn my navy suit today, the one Nathaniel had always said made me look severe. Good. I wanted to look severe. I wanted to look like the kind of woman who couldn't be broken by something as mundane as divorce and betrayal. Judge Pemberton gathered her papers and left through the door behind the bench. The moment she disappeared, Nathaniel turned to me with that smile still plastered on his face. "Nothing personal, Camila," he said, using my first name like we were old friends catching up over coffee. "But you have to understand, I paid for that house. My money, my name on the deed, it was always mine." "Our money," I corrected quietly. "Our name, until 6 months ago." "Semantics." He waved his hand dismissively. "The point is," the judge agreed. "The house is mine. You'll have plenty of time to find a nice little apartment somewhere." A nice little apartment, after 15 years of marriage, after putting my career on hold so he could build his medical practice, after countless dinner parties where I played the perfect doctor's wife, after decorating and maintaining a 5-bedroom house that had been featured in local home magazines. He thought a nice little apartment was appropriate compensation. Vanessa tugged on his arm. "Baby, we should go. We have that meeting with the interior designer at 3. Interior designer. They were already planning to redecorate, to erase every trace of me from the home I'd built." "Of course." Nathaniel straightened his tie, the burgundy one I'd given him for our 10th anniversary. "Camila, I hope there won't be any drama about moving out. I'd hate to have to involve the sheriff's department." "There won't be any drama," I said, my voice steady as a heartbeat. "You have my word." He seemed surprised by my composure. He'd probably expected tears or rage, or some kind of scene that would prove to Vanessa and his lawyer and everyone watching that he'd made the right choice in leaving me, that I was the problem, not him. I gave him nothing. "Well, good then." He adjusted his jacket, suddenly uncomfortable with my calm. "I'll have my lawyer send over the details about the timeline." "That won't be necessary. 30 days is clear enough." They left together, Vanessa's heels clicking against the tile floor like a countdown timer. Anthony waited until they'd exited before speaking. "I'm sorry, Camila. I really thought we had a stronger case for the house. The contributions you made, the sweat equity. It's fine, Anthony." "It's not fine. It's patently unfair. He committed adultery, you were faithful, and somehow he walks away with everything while you—" I said it's fine. I picked up my purse, checking to make sure the small leather folder inside was still secure. It was. Of course it was. I'd checked it 3 times this morning. "Thank you for your representation. I'll settle your final bill by the end of the week." "Camila, there's no rush on that, given the circumstances." "End of the week, Anthony. I always pay my debts." I walked out of the courtroom with my head high and my spine straight, past the other people waiting for their own cases, past the security checkpoint, through the heavy glass doors, and into the October afternoon. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and coming rain. My car was parked 3 blocks away. I walked slowly, in no particular hurry. People passed me on the sidewalk, lawyers in expensive suits, plaintiffs in their Sunday best, witnesses checking their phones. None of them knew that the composed woman in the navy suit had just lost everything. None of them could see the way my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but I wasn't trapped. That was the thing Nathaniel didn't understand. Had never understood about me. I'd known about Vanessa for 8 months. Not 6 months, when he claimed the affair had started. 8 months ago, I'd found a receipt from a hotel restaurant in his jacket pocket, a dinner for 2 that cost more than we usually spent on our anniversary. When I'd asked him about it casually over breakfast the next morning, he'd claimed it was a business dinner with a pharmaceutical rep. Maybe he'd even believed his own lie. Men like Nathaniel were very good at believing their own lies. But I'd started watching after that. Carefully. Quietly. Noticing the late nights that became more frequent, the new cologne, the way he'd started going to the gym 5 days a week when he'd barely managed twice a week before, the way he smiled at his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. I'd hired a private investigator named Marcus. Former police detective, discreet, thorough. He'd given me photos, time-stamped and dated. Nathaniel and Vanessa at restaurants. Nathaniel and Vanessa at hotels. Nathaniel and Vanessa apartment hunting together. 3 months before he'd even mentioned the word divorce to me, I had evidence that could have destroyed him in court. Evidence of premeditated deception, of hidden assets, of plans made long before he'd sat me down and delivered his rehearsed speech about growing apart and wanting different things. I'd given none of it to Anthony. Instead, I'd done something else. Something that had taken patience and planning and the kind of cold-blooded strategy that Nathaniel would never have believed me capable of. I reached my car, a 7-year-old sedan that had been mine before the marriage and would remain mine after. I slid behind the wheel and sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, breathing slowly and deliberately. Then I pulled out my phone and made a call. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was young, energetic, slightly breathless. "Tyler, it's Camila. Is everything ready?" "Oh, yes, ma'am. Everything's in place exactly like you specified. The closing is scheduled for next week, like you requested." "And the current owner? No complications?" "None at all. He seemed eager to sell, actually. Almost suspiciously eager, if I'm honest. But his lawyer checked out, the title is clear, and the bank approved your financing. It's all very straightforward." "Good. Thank you, Tyler. I'll see you at the closing." I ended the call and started the engine. As I pulled out of the parking space, I allowed myself a small smile. The first genuine expression I'd worn since walking into the courtroom that morning. Nathaniel thought he'd won. He thought taking the house was his victory. His way of punishing me for not being young and exciting like Vanessa. His way of starting fresh without the weight of our shared history dragging him down. He had no idea what was coming. Because the thing about revenge is that it works best when the other person doesn't see it coming. When they're so convinced of their own superiority, so certain they've outmaneuvered you, that they never stop to question whether you might have been planning something all along. Nathaniel had taught me many things during our 15 years together. How to host dinner parties. How to navigate medical community politics. How to smile and nod and appear supportive while feeling completely invisible. But the most valuable lesson he'd taught me, though he didn't know it, was this. The person who appears to have lost everything is the person no one bothers to watch. And unwatched people can accomplish extraordinary things. The house I'd be leaving in 30 days sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, surrounded by mature oak trees that turned gold and crimson in the fall. I'd fallen in love with it the moment the realtor had shown it to us 15 years ago, when Nathaniel had just finished his residency and I'd been working as a high school biology teacher. "It's too expensive," I'd said, standing in the empty living room with its hardwood floors and bay windows. "We'll grow into it," Nathaniel had replied, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "Besides, a doctor needs a house that reflects his success. First impressions matter in my field." Even then, it had been about him. About his needs, his image, his success. But I'd been young and in love and convinced that supporting his dreams was the same as building our dreams together. So I'd quit my teaching job when he'd asked me to, claiming that managing his practice's administrative work and being available for the social obligations of a doctor's wife was more important than my career. "It's temporary," he'd promised, "just until the practice is established. Then you can go back to teaching if you want." I'd never gone back. The practice had needed me, he'd said. And then we'd been trying for children, and it didn't make sense to start a new job when I might be going on maternity leave soon. And then the years had passed, and suddenly I was 38 years old with no recent work history and a marriage that was dissolving like sugar in water. I pulled into the driveway, noting that the flower beds needed weeding. I'd been letting things slide over the past few months, too focused on other matters to maintain the picture-perfect exterior I'd cultivated for years. Let Vanessa deal with the landscaping. Let her learn that houses like this required constant attention, constant work, constant sacrifice. Inside, the house was exactly as I'd left it that morning. Spotlessly clean, perfectly organized, every surface gleaming. I'd been preparing to leave since the day Nathaniel had moved out 6 months ago, quietly sorting through 15 years of accumulated possessions, deciding what to keep and what to abandon. I'd kept very little. Clothes, personal items, a few pieces of furniture that had been mine before the marriage. Everything else, all the wedding gifts, all the pieces we'd collected together, all the things that represented our shared life, I was leaving behind. Let him have it all. Let Vanessa move into a fully furnished home and think she'd won some kind of prize. They had no idea that the real value of this house had nothing to do with the furniture. I changed out of my court clothes into jeans and a sweater, then made myself tea in the kitchen I'd remodeled 3 years ago. The cabinets were custom maple, the countertops granite, the appliances all high-end stainless steel. I'd spent months choosing every detail, and Nathaniel had complained about the cost the entire time. "It's an investment," I'd argued. "Good kitchens sell houses." "We're not selling the house," he'd replied. "This is our forever home." Forever had turned out to be significantly shorter than advertised. I took my tea to the small office I'd claimed as my own, the only room in the house that Nathaniel had never cared about or tried to control. My desk faced the window overlooking the backyard, where I'd planted a vegetable garden that first summer, before I'd realized Nathaniel had no interest in homegrown tomatoes or fresh herbs. I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder labeled Financial Records. Inside were meticulously organized spreadsheets documenting 15 years of household expenses, investments, and financial decisions. Every grocery receipt, every utility bill, every home improvement cost, every dinner party expense, all of it tracked and categorized and saved. Nathaniel had never looked at these records. He'd handed me his paycheck, eventually his practice checks, and assumed I was managing the household finances competently. Which I was, more than competently. I'd turned his doctor's salary into a comfortable nest egg through careful budgeting and smart investments that were almost entirely in my name. That was the funny thing about Nathaniel's assumptions. He'd been so focused on building his practice, on being the successful doctor, that he'd never paid attention to the practical details of our life. He'd never questioned why I'd set up our accounts the way I had. Never wondered why the investment portfolios were structured the way they were. Never asked why certain assets were titled solely in my name while others were joint. I'd told him it was for tax purposes, for estate planning, for liability protection, in case he was sued for malpractice. All reasonable explanations that he'd accepted without investigation because managing money bored him. And I'd always handled it flawlessly. "You're so much better at this than I am," he'd say, signing whatever documents I put in front of him. "I'm lucky to have someone who understands all this financial stuff." I'd been building a fortress, brick by invisible brick, and he'd never noticed. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Harper. "How did it go today? Are you okay?" I considered how to answer. Harper had been furious on my behalf throughout the divorce proceedings. She'd wanted me to fight harder, to expose Nathaniel's affair publicly, to make him pay in every possible way. She didn't understand that revenge required patience, not rage. Lost the house, I typed back. Have 30 days to move out. 3 dots appeared immediately, then, that's bullshit, I'm coming over. Not tonight, I need to be alone. Cam, you shouldn't be alone right now. I'm fine, really. We'll talk tomorrow. I silenced my phone before she could argue further. I loved my sister, but she wouldn't understand what I was about to do. She'd try to talk me out of it, or worse, she'd try to help, and I needed to do this alone. Some revenges were too personal to share. The house settled around me as evening fell, all those familiar creaks and sighs I'd learned over 15 years. I knew which floorboards squeaked, which doors stuck in humid weather, which windows let in drafts. I knew this house better than Nathaniel ever had, because he'd never been the one to maintain it, to repair it, to care for it. He thought he was taking something valuable from me. He had no idea he was taking something broken. I spent the evening going through the house room by room, not with sadness but with the clinical detachment of a general surveying a battlefield after victory. The living room with its leather furniture and expensive area rugs. The dining room, where I'd hosted dozens of dinner parties for Nathaniel's colleagues and their wives. The master bedroom where our marriage had slowly died, so gradually neither of us had noticed until it was too late. Or rather, until he'd noticed someone else. In the back of my closet, behind the winter coats, was a box I'd hidden 6 months ago. I pulled it out now and opened it, checking that the contents were still intact. Documents, mostly. Copies of financial records, property deeds, investment statements. Evidence of everything I'd built while Nathaniel had been busy building his affair. Also in the box, a small velvet bag containing my grandmother's jewelry. Real pieces, antique and valuable, that I'd inherited when she died. Nathaniel thought they were costume jewelry because I'd never worn them. I'd kept them hidden, knowing somehow that I might need them someday. That day had come. I put the box in my car, along with 3 other boxes I'd been gradually packing. Personal papers, photographs from before my marriage, my grandmother's recipe cards. Things that mattered to me that Nathaniel wouldn't even notice were gone. By midnight, I'd removed everything that was truly important. The house still looked full, still looked lived in, but everything that carried actual meaning or value was now in my car or in a storage unit I'd rented 3 months ago. To anyone else, it would look like I was cooperating with the divorce decree, preparing to leave quietly and without fuss. To me, it looked like exactly what it was, the final stage of a carefully executed plan. I slept that night in the guest bedroom, not because I couldn't bear to sleep in the master, but because I'd already started emotionally moving out months ago. The moment Marcus had handed me those photographs and I'd seen the proof of what I'd already suspected, I'd begun the process of detaching from this place. People think revenge is about anger. It's not. Anger is hot and impulsive and messy. Revenge is cold and calculated and clean. Anger makes you do stupid things. Revenge requires you to be smarter than you've ever been. And I'd spent 8 months being very, very smart. Morning came with frost on the windows and the kind of sharp autumn sunlight that made everything look crystalline and new. I woke early, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, reviewing my plans one final time. Everything was in motion now. Everything was proceeding exactly as I'd designed. In 30 days, I'd be gone from this house. But Nathaniel's nightmare would just be beginning. The doorbell rang at 8:30. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I checked the security camera app on my phone, I saw Harper standing on the front porch, holding a bag from the bakery we'd loved since childhood. I opened the door. I said I needed to be alone. You said that last night. It's morning now. She pushed past me into the house, the way only sisters can. Besides, I brought provisions, chocolate croissants and those almond things you like. Harper was 3 years younger than me, but looked older. Not because she'd aged poorly, but because she'd never learned to hide her emotions the way I had. Every stress line, every worry, every disappointment showed on her face. She worked as a nurse at the same hospital where Nathaniel had privileges, which was how she'd first learned about his affair with Vanessa. I saw them in the parking garage, she'd told me 8 months ago, standing in this same kitchen with tears of fury in her eyes. They were all over each other, like teenagers. I'm so sorry, Cam. I wanted to punch him. but I thought you should hear it from me first. I'd already known by then, had already seen Marcus's photographs. But I'd pretended to be shocked, because Harper needed to feel like she was protecting me. Now she spread the bakery offerings on the kitchen counter and pulled me into a hug. "How are you really?" "I'm fine. You keep saying that, but nobody's fine after losing their house in a divorce to a cheating asshole." "I didn't lose it. The judge awarded it to him. There's a difference." "Semantics." She pulled back, studying my face the way nurses studied patients, looking for signs of distress. "You're too calm. It's worrying me. Would you prefer if I was hysterical? I'd prefer if you'd show some emotion. Any emotion. You've been like this for months, just going through the motions, acting like none of this affects you. It's not healthy." I poured her coffee, adding cream and sugar the way she liked it. "I've cried plenty, Harper. I just don't do it in public." That was a lie, but it was the lie she needed to hear. The truth was I hadn't cried at all. I'd moved past crying months ago, past sadness and grief and self-pity, into a place that was colder and clearer. I'd realized that tears were a waste of energy better spent on planning. "Have you thought about where you'll go?" Harper asked, biting into a croissant. "Because you know you can stay with me and Kyle until you figure things out. The guest room is always open." "I appreciate that, but I have something lined up. An apartment? Something like that." She studied me with those nurse's eyes again. "You're being mysterious. I'm being private. There's a difference." "Is this about money? Because I know the settlement wasn't great, but you have your investments, right? The ones you set up, you're not going to be destitute." If she only knew. The settlement had been terrible on paper. Nathaniel kept the house, the car, and most of the tangible assets. I'd kept my investment accounts and received a small amount of alimony for 5 years, barely enough to live on. But the investment accounts were worth almost $2 million. Money I'd accumulated over 15 years through careful management and strategic planning. Money Nathaniel knew existed, but had never actually looked at closely enough to understand the full value. His lawyer had barely fought over the investments, focusing instead on the house and Nathaniel's medical practice. They'd thought they were winning by getting the big, obvious assets. They had no idea they'd been outmaneuvered from the start. "I'll be comfortable," I said, which was perhaps the understatement of the century. Harper relaxed slightly. "Okay. Good. I was worried you'd be struggling financially on top of everything else." We spent the next hour talking about her life, her work, her husband Kyle's new job opportunity. I asked questions and made appropriate comments, playing the role of interested sister, while my mind was 3 weeks ahead, imagining Nathaniel's face when he realized what I'd done. After Harper left, I returned to my laptop and pulled up the property records for 847 Willow Creek Drive. The house that had been my home for 15 years. The house Nathaniel thought he'd won. The property value had increased significantly since we'd bought it. The neighborhood had gentrified, and similar houses were selling for 3 times what we'd paid. Nathaniel's lawyer had used that appreciation as part of his argument for why Nathaniel should keep the house. He'd paid for it, therefore he was entitled to the appreciation. What they'd failed to mention in court was that I'd paid for the appreciation. Every renovation, every upgrade, every improvement had been funded with money I'd managed and invested. The kitchen remodel, the bathroom additions, the new roof, the landscaping, all of it documented in my meticulous records. All of it paid for with joint funds that I'd carefully allocated. Nathaniel had been awarded a house that I'd built, and he had no idea that the foundation was rotting. That was the secret I'd kept for 2 years. The secret I'd discovered when we'd had an inspection done for refinancing. The inspector had found evidence of water damage in the crawl space, suggesting possible foundation issues. The report recommended further investigation by a structural engineer. I'd never shown Nathaniel that report. I'd paid the inspector in cash for a second, edited version that removed the concerning findings. Then I'd hidden the original in my box of important documents and quietly stopped maintaining certain aspects of the house's drainage system. For 2 years, water had been slowly accumulating around the foundation. For 2 years, I'd watched for signs of the damage spreading. Cracks in the walls, doors that wouldn't close properly, windows that stuck. For 2 years, I documented the deterioration with time-stamped photographs that I'd stored in encrypted cloud storage. Nathaniel thought he was getting a valuable asset. He was actually getting a money pit that would require hundreds of thousands of dollars to repair. Maybe more. The structural engineer's estimate, which I'd obtained quietly 6 months ago, had suggested the foundation would need to be completely replaced. Cost: somewhere between $200,000 and $400,000. His insurance wouldn't cover it. Foundation issues caused by poor drainage weren't covered under standard homeowners' policies. I knew because I'd read our policy carefully, multiple times. But the really beautiful part, the part that made me smile every time I thought about it, was that he wouldn't discover the problem immediately. The damage was progressing slowly. It might take 6 months, maybe a year, before it became obvious, before the doors wouldn't close and the floors started to slope and the cracks became too large to ignore. By then, I'd be long gone, and any attempt to claim I'd known about the problem and hidden it would be hard to prove. After all, I wasn't a structural engineer. How could I have known there was a problem if the official inspection report, the one in the house files, the one his lawyer had reviewed during discovery, showed everything was fine? The original report, the one that told the truth, was hidden in a safety deposit box at a bank Nathaniel didn't know I used. Insurance against him trying to sue me later. If he came after me, I'd produce it and claim I'd just received it, that I'd been about to tell him when he filed for divorce. Plausible deniability, wrapped in perfect documentation. My phone rang. I didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. "Mrs. Crane, this is Vanessa Parker." I held the phone away from my ear for a moment, startled. Vanessa was calling me? I put the phone back carefully. "Ms. Winters, actually, the divorce is final." "Right, of course, I'm sorry." She didn't sound sorry. She sounded nervous. "I hope it's okay that I called. Nathaniel gave me your number. I wanted to talk to you about the house." "What about it?" "Well, we're planning to move in as soon as you're out, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to walk me through some things. You know, where things are, how things work. The heating system, the security code, that kind of thing." The audacity of it stole my breath. She wanted me to give her a tour of my home, to help her settle into the life she'd stolen. "I'll leave written instructions," I said, my voice impressively calm. "Everything you need to know will be in a folder on the kitchen counter." "Oh, okay." She paused. "Nathaniel also wanted me to ask about the furniture. There are some pieces we'd like to keep and some we're planning to replace. If there's anything you want, you should take it before we move in." "I'm taking what's mine, the rest stays. Right? It's just, some of this furniture is really outdated. We want to start fresh, make it feel like our home, you know? Our home." The words were like a slap. I closed my eyes, counted to 5, opened them again. "Vanessa, I have 30 days to vacate the premises. What you do with the house after I'm gone is not my concern. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a great deal to do." "Wait, one more thing, the garden in the back. Nathaniel said you're really proud of it, but we're thinking of putting in a pool instead. Is that something you'd want to, I don't know, transplant some of your plants before we tear it out?" The garden I'd spent 10 years cultivating. The roses I'd chosen carefully for fragrance and color. The herb beds that I'd built with my own hands. The small fountain I'd saved for and installed myself because Nathaniel said hiring someone was too expensive. She was going to tear it out for a pool. "Do whatever you want," I said. "It's your property now." I hung up before she could respond, before my composure could crack. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in my hands, breathing carefully, reminding myself why I couldn't react, why I had to stay cold and focused. The garden didn't matter. The furniture didn't matter. None of it mattered because in 30 days I'd be gone, and in 6 months to a year, Nathaniel would be dealing with foundation issues that would drain his savings and possibly bankrupt him. That was the goal. That was the plan. Everything else was just noise. But God, I wanted to tell her. I wanted to explain exactly what she was getting herself into, the financial disaster she was signing up for. I wanted to watch her face when she realized that stealing another woman's husband came with consequences. Instead, I deleted her number from my call history and returned to my laptop. Revenge required discipline. Revenge required patience. Revenge required me to be better than my anger, smarter than my pain. And I would be. I had been for 8 months. I could manage 30 more days. The next week passed in a blur of packing and final arrangements. I hired movers for the furniture I was taking, my bedroom set from before the marriage, the desk from my office, a few other pieces that held sentimental value. Everything else I left behind, each abandoned item, another piece of evidence that I was cooperating fully with the divorce decree. I'd rented a moving truck for a Saturday in 3 weeks, giving myself time to finish packing and organize everything for transport. The storage unit held most of what I truly cared about. The apartment I'd supposedly rented, that's what I'd told Harper and anyone else who asked, was ready for move-in. Except there was no apartment. There was something much better. On Wednesday afternoon, I drove across town to a law office in the financial district. The building was new, all glass and steel, the kind of place where serious money changed hands. I took the elevator to the 14th floor and checked in with the receptionist. Camila Winters, to see James Bradford. Of course, he's expecting you. James Bradford was a real estate attorney I'd found through discreet research 6 months ago. He specialized in complex property transactions and had a reputation for absolute discretion. I'd paid his retainer in cash, and all our communications had been through encrypted email and burner phones. His office overlooked the city, all dark wood and leather furniture and the kind of quiet that money buys. He stood when I entered, shaking my hand with a firm grip. "Miss Winters, please have a seat. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you." He settled behind his desk and pulled up files on his computer. "I have good news. The closing is scheduled for next Friday, as we discussed. All the paperwork is in order, the title is clear, and the bank has approved your financing. No complications? None whatsoever." The seller was eager to close quickly. Apparently, he's relocating for work and wanted to finalize everything before leaving the state. James smiled slightly. "I have to say, Miss Winters, this is one of the more unusual transactions I've handled." "How so?" "It's not often someone purchases their ex-husband's new home before he's even moved in." I allowed myself a small smile. I prefer to think of it as a strategic real estate investment. "Indeed." He pulled up documents on his screen. "Let's review the details one more time. You're purchasing the property at 1247 Riverside Court for $480,000. The seller, Mr. Thomas Ashford, purchased it 3 months ago for $400,000 and is taking a slight loss due to his need for quick sale. Unfortunate for him. Quite. The property is currently vacant, which works in your favor. You'll take possession immediately upon closing, and there are no tenants or occupancy issues to worry about. I'd found the house 6 months ago, during one of my evening drives when I'd been trying to clear my head. It was a beautiful craftsman-style home with a wide porch and mature gardens, located in one of the city's most desirable neighborhoods. A for sale sign had been planted in the front yard, and on impulse, I'd called the number. The house had been perfect. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, updated kitchen, hardwood floors throughout. The realtor had mentioned that the seller was being transferred and needed to close quickly. I'd immediately seen the opportunity. 2 days later, Marcus, my private investigator, had confirmed what I'd suspected. Nathaniel and Vanessa had looked at that exact house. They'd talked about putting in an offer, but they'd decided to wait until after the divorce was final, until they could afford something really special. I'd made my offer that same day. All cash, contingent on closing before the divorce was finalized. The seller had accepted immediately. The house at 1247 Riverside Court, the house Nathaniel and Vanessa had wanted, had dreamed about, had planned to make their new beginning, was going to be mine. And they wouldn't know until it was too late. "The deed will be recorded in your maiden name," James continued. "Camila Winters, as you requested, no connection to your married name or your ex-husband." "Perfect." "I should ask, and you don't have to answer, but why go to such lengths? If you wanted this particular house, you could have simply purchased it in the normal way after the divorce. Because timing matters. And because I want them to see it every time they drive past on their way to the house they took from me." Understanding dawned on James's face. "The addresses, they're in the same neighborhood. 3 blocks apart, Close enough that they'll see my name on the mailbox eventually. Close enough that they'll realize what I've done. That's... He paused, choosing his words carefully. That's quite calculated. You say that like it's a bad thing. Not at all. In fact, I admire the strategy. He closed his laptop. The closing is Friday at 2 p.m. You'll need your driver's license and the cashier's check for the down payment. The bank will handle the rest through wire transfer. I'll be there. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in months. The pieces were falling into place with clockwork precision. In 10 days, I'd close on the house. In 3 weeks, I'd move out of 847 Willow Creek Drive. And then I'd simply wait for Nathaniel and Vanessa to discover what they'd really won. That evening, I had dinner with Harper and Kyle at their house in the suburbs. Harper had insisted, claiming I was becoming too isolated, spending too much time alone in that house with all those memories. Kyle grilled steaks while Harper and I sat on their back deck with wine, watching the sunset behind the neighbor's fence. So tell me about this apartment, Harper said. Where is it? Can I see it? Not yet. It needs some work before it's ready. What kind of work? Painting, mostly. Some deep cleaning. You know how rental units can be when tenants move out. It wasn't entirely a lie. The house did need some work. Cosmetic updates I'd already scheduled contractors to handle, but Harper would discover the truth soon enough. When can I visit? Harper pressed. I want to make sure you're okay, that it's safe and comfortable. After I'm settled, give me a month or so. A month? Cam, that's Harper. I set my wine glass down carefully. I appreciate your concern. Really, I do. But I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing. I'm not falling apart. I'm not making rash decisions. I'm just trying to start over in my own way, on my own terms. She studied me for a long moment, then sighed. Okay, I'll back off. But I reserve the right to worry about you. I wouldn't expect anything else. Kyle called us in for dinner, and we spent the next 2 hours in pleasant conversation about everything except my divorce. Kyle told stories from his new job in IT management. Harper shared updates about their attempts to get pregnant. 6 months of trying with no success yet. I listened and responded and played the role of supportive sister and friend. But part of my mind was 3 weeks ahead, imagining Nathaniel's reaction when he discovered I'd bought the house he wanted. Would he be angry? Confused? Would he immediately suspect I'd done it deliberately? Or would he convince himself it was coincidence? It didn't matter either way. What mattered was that he'd know I was still there, still in his orbit, still a presence he couldn't quite escape. Every time he drove past my house, and he'd have to, it was on the main route to his medical practice, he'd be reminded that I hadn't simply disappeared after the divorce. I'd rebuilt. Right in front of him. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange liminal space between my old life and whatever was coming next. I continued packing, continued sorting through 15 years of accumulated possessions, continued preparing to leave the house that had been my home for so long. Nathaniel came by once, unannounced, on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the garage, sorting through boxes of holiday decorations, when I heard his car pull into the driveway. I took a moment to compose myself before walking back into the house. He was standing in the kitchen, looking around with the proprietary air of someone inspecting their property. You could have knocked, I said from the doorway. He turned, startled. It's my house. I don't need to knock. It's still legally my residence for another week and a half. Technically, yes. He opened the refrigerator, frowned at the contents. You're letting things get sparse. I'm moving out. Why would I keep a full refrigerator? He closed it and leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. He'd put on a little weight since moving out, I noticed. Vanessa probably cooked for him, trying to prove she was domestic despite her youth. Or maybe they ate out constantly. Nathaniel had always preferred restaurants to home cooking. I wanted to talk to you about the transition, he said. Vanessa and I would like to move in as soon as you're out, preferably the same day. That's fine. Really, I thought you might want more time, or... Why would I want more time? I'm ready to leave. He frowned, clearly unsettled by my cooperation. He'd probably expected drama, tears, last-minute attempts to delay or negotiate. Okay, good. We'll have movers come that afternoon then. He paused. Vanessa mentioned she called you, about the garden. She did. And you don't care that we're removing it? It's your property. Do what you want. Right. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. Look, Camila, I know this whole situation has been difficult. Has it? Of course it has. Divorce is never easy, especially after 15 years. But I hope we can be civil. Maybe even friendly, eventually. I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to remember what I'd loved about this man. He was objectively handsome, with the kind of distinguished looks that worked well for a doctor. Silver threading through his dark hair, fine lines around his eyes that suggested wisdom rather than age. He'd always known how to present himself, how to project confidence and competence. But I couldn't remember any more what had drawn me to him. Whatever it had been, it was gone now, burned away by months of careful, cold planning. We'll be civil, I said, but we won't be friends. You don't get to have it both ways, Nathaniel. You don't get to leave me for a younger woman, take my house, and then expect me to be grateful about it. I never expected you to be grateful. Good, because I'm not. I walked past him toward the garage. If that's all you came to say, I have work to do. Actually, I wanted to ask about the house files, warranties, repair records, that kind of thing. Vanessa and I want to know what maintenance has been done, what might need attention. My heart rate kicked up, but I kept my expression neutral. Everything's in the file cabinet in the office. I'll leave it for you. Is there anything we should know about? Any problems or issues? This was it. The moment where I could tell him about the foundation, where I could be honest and warn him about what he was inheriting, where I could be the bigger person and walk away with my conscience clear. Nothing major, I said instead. Regular maintenance stuff. It's all documented. And the inspection? The one we had done for the refinancing 2 years ago? In the files. He nodded, satisfied. Okay, thanks. I appreciate you being cooperative about all this. I didn't respond. I just returned to the garage and listened as he let himself out the front door, his footsteps fading, his car starting and pulling away. I'd lied directly to him. I'd concealed material defects in the property. If he discovered the foundation issues and could prove I'd known about them, he might have grounds to sue me. But he wouldn't discover them for months. And by then, the chain of causation would be muddy enough that proving I'd known would be nearly impossible. Besides, I had my insurance policy. The original inspection report, safely hidden, ready to produce if needed, with a story about just having received it. Was I a bad person for doing this? Probably. Was I okay with that? Absolutely. Nathaniel had taught me that being good, being loyal, being the perfect supportive wife meant nothing when someone decided you were no longer useful. So I'd stopped being good and started being strategic. Friday arrived with fog that refused to burn off, leaving the city wrapped in gray dampness that matched my mood. Today was closing day for the house at 1247 Riverside Court. Today I'd officially become the owner of the property Nathaniel and Vanessa had wanted. I dressed carefully in a charcoal suit and low heels, pulling my hair back in a neat bun. Professional, successful, composed. The image of a woman who had her life together, who hadn't been destroyed by divorce and betrayal. The closing was at James Bradford's office. I arrived 10 minutes early and sat in the waiting area, reviewing documents on my phone while the receptionist made small talk about the weather. Miss Winters? James appeared in the doorway. We're ready for you. The conference room held a long table surrounded by leather chairs. Already seated were the title company representative, the bank's attorney, and the seller, a nervous-looking man in his 40s who kept checking his watch. Mr. Ashford, this is Ms. Winters, James said, making introductions. We shook hands across the table. His palm was sweaty. Thank you for being flexible with the timeline, I said. I know you needed to close quickly. My company gave me 3 weeks to relocate, he replied. I'm just grateful someone was willing to make an all-cash offer. Most buyers need financing and that takes time. Well, it worked out for both of us. The next hour was spent signing documents, reviewing disclosures, transferring funds. The title company representative walked us through each page with practiced efficiency, explaining terms and conditions I'd already read a dozen times. Mr. Ashford signed his stack of papers. I signed mine, and just like that, the house was mine. Congratulations, Miss Winters, the title rep said, handing me a folder containing copies of all the paperwork and a set of keys. You're now the proud owner of 1247 Riverside Court." I held the keys in my palm, feeling their weight. They were warm from being in the folder, ordinary brass keys that represented something extraordinary, a new beginning built on the wreckage of my marriage. After the closing, I drove directly to my new house. My house. The words felt strange even in my mind. The fog had started to lift, revealing pale autumn sunshine that made the craftsman-style home glow golden. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the wide front porch with its built-in benches, the leaded glass windows, the careful landscaping that someone had clearly loved. This was mine. Not ours, not his, but mine alone. I walked up the front steps and unlocked the door, stepping into the empty living room with its hardwood floors and stone fireplace. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaning products and fresh paint. The previous owner had left it in perfect condition. I walked through each room slowly, imagining furniture placement, color schemes, how I'd make this space truly mine. The kitchen had been updated with white cabinets and granite counters. The bathrooms were clean and functional. The bedrooms were good sizes, with plenty of natural light. But it was the backyard that sealed it for me. A large deck opened onto a garden that was obviously loved. Mature perennials, a small pond with a fountain, a stone path leading to a bench beneath a Japanese maple. Someone had put years of work into this space. It reminded me of the garden I was leaving behind. The garden Vanessa was going to tear up for a pool. I sat on the deck steps and pulled out my phone, texting Tyler, my new realtor. "Closed on the house. Thank you for all your help." His response was immediate. "Congratulations. When do you move in?" "Next week. Movers are scheduled for Saturday." "Exciting. Let me know if you need recommendations for contractors, landscapers, anything like that." "Will do. Thanks again." I pocketed my phone and just sat, listening to the fountain burble, watching birds flit through the garden, breathing in the cool autumn air. For the first time in 8 months, maybe longer, I felt something approaching peace. This was what starting over looked like. Not the apartment Harper imagined I was renting, not some sad bachelor pad where I'd lick my wounds and feel sorry for myself, but a real home, better than the one I'd left, in a better neighborhood, completely mine, and 3 blocks away from where Nathaniel and Vanessa would soon be dealing with foundation issues they couldn't afford to fix. The symmetry was beautiful. Moving day arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if the universe was offering one last gift before winter settled in. I'd hired professional movers who arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, their truck idling in the driveway as they began loading furniture and boxes. Harper showed up at 8 with coffee and bagels. "I can't believe you're really leaving," she said, looking around the nearly empty living room. "This house has been part of our lives for so long." It was never really part of my life. It was part of Nathaniel's image. Still, it's strange seeing it like this, like a skeleton. She was right. With most of the furniture gone and only the built-ins remaining, the house looked bigger and more hollow. Every sound echoed. Every footstep seemed loud against the bare floors. "Have you heard from Nathaniel?" Harper asked. "Does he know you're moving out today?" "I sent him an email yesterday. He and Vanessa are planning to move in tomorrow." "Tomorrow? They couldn't even wait a week." "Why would they? It's their house now." Harper set down her coffee cup on the kitchen counter. The granite I'd chosen, the backsplash I'd agonized over. "I still think you should have fought harder. That judge was clearly biased. You deserved better than this." "I got what I deserved," I said, and I meant it, though not in the way Harper thought. The movers finished loading by noon. I did one final walkthrough, checking closets and cupboards, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything. In the office, I left the file cabinet exactly as Nathaniel had requested, full of maintenance records and warranties, and the doctored inspection report that showed no foundation issues. On the kitchen counter, I left a folder labeled House Information for Vanessa. Inside were instructions for the heating system, the security code, the garbage collection schedule. Everything she'd asked for. I'd even included a list of reliable contractors and service providers. I was being cooperative, helpful, even. The perfect ex-wife, gracious in defeat. The last thing I did was walk through the backyard garden one final time. My roses were entering dormancy, the herb beds brown and withered. The fountain I'd installed was still running, water trickling over stones I'd chosen individually. I didn't feel sad leaving it. Gardens were temporary anyway, always changing, always requiring renewal. Let Vanessa tear it up. Let her build her pool. Let her discover that maintaining a house like this required more than money. It required attention and care and actual knowledge. Harper drove me to my new apartment, following the moving truck. I'd asked her not to come inside, claiming it was a disaster and I needed time to organize before having visitors. She'd argued, but ultimately agreed to drop me off and leave. "Call me tomorrow," she'd said, hugging me goodbye. "Let me know how the first night goes." "I will. Thank you for being here today." That's what sisters do. She drove away, and I stood on the sidewalk in front of 1247 Riverside Court, watching the movers unload my furniture, watching my new life begin. The house looked even better with my things in it. The movers placed furniture according to my instructions, and gradually the empty rooms transformed into spaces that felt intentional and lived in. My bedroom set fit perfectly in the master. My desk looked right in the front room I'd designated as an office. Even the few pieces of living room furniture I'd brought seemed designed for this space. By 6 p.m., the movers were gone, and I was alone in my new house. I ordered pizza delivery and sat on the deck, eating straight from the box and watching the sunset through the trees. Tomorrow, Nathaniel and Vanessa would move into 847 Willow Creek Drive. They'd probably celebrate, toasting their new beginning with expensive wine. They'd make love in the master bedroom, and Vanessa would probably redecorate immediately, erasing every trace of me from the space. And I'd be here, 3 blocks away, living in the house they'd wanted, knowing something they didn't know. My phone buzzed with a text from Harper. "Settled in? How's the apartment?" I looked around at my beautiful craftsman house with its hardwood floors and stone fireplace, at the garden visible through the deck doors, at the life I'd built from the ashes of my marriage. "It's perfect," I texted back. Better than I expected. It was the truth. Just not the truth she was imagining. The first week in my new house passed in a blur of unpacking and organizing. I bought new dishes, new towels, new bedding, things that had no connection to my marriage or my old life. I hung artwork on the walls, arranged furniture, made the space truly mine. I also did something I hadn't done in 15 years. I applied for jobs. Teaching positions specifically. High school biology, my original field before Nathaniel had convinced me to give it up. I'd kept my teaching license current, taking the required continuing education courses online, always telling myself it was just in case, even though I'd never planned to use it. Now I had a use for it. 3 schools in the district were hiring for mid-year positions, teachers who'd retired or relocated, leaving gaps that needed filling. I sent applications to all 3, along with a cover letter explaining my 15-year gap in employment as focusing on family and personal growth. It wasn't a lie. I'd focused very intently on my family's dissolution and my own transformation from naive wife to strategic planner. On Thursday afternoon, I got my first call back. Lincoln High School, the same school where I'd taught before marrying Nathaniel. The principal, Dr. Martinez, remembered me. "Camila Winters," she said warmly over the phone. "I wondered if you'd ever come back to teaching. You were one of our best, you know. The students loved you." "Thank you. I'm ready to return now." "Can you come in for an interview? Tomorrow afternoon?" "I'd love to." The interview went well. Dr. Martinez and the department head asked about my teaching philosophy, my approach to lab safety, my familiarity with current curriculum standards. I answered confidently, drawing on knowledge I'd kept sharp despite years away from the classroom. "Why now?" Dr. Martinez asked toward the end. "What changed?" "My circumstances changed," I said carefully. "I recently went through a divorce. I'm rebuilding my life, and teaching was always what I loved most." She nodded sympathetically. "I went through a divorce myself a few years ago. It's not easy, but sometimes it opens doors we didn't know were there." "Exactly. Can you start Monday?" "I know that's fast, but we've been without a full-time biology teacher for 3 weeks now, and the substitute isn't working out." "Monday is perfect." I left the interview with a job offer and a contract to sign. $45,000 a year, significantly less than what Nathaniel earned, but more than enough to live on comfortably when combined with my investment income and the small alimony payments I'd be receiving. More importantly, I'd be doing work that mattered. Teaching students who needed me, rather than supporting a husband who'd taken me for granted. That evening, I sat on my deck with a glass of wine, reviewing the employment paperwork and feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Pride in myself. Not pride in my husband's achievements, not pride in the perfect home I'd maintained, but pride in my own accomplishments. I'd survived betrayal, I'd planned revenge, I'd bought a house, I'd landed a job, and I'd done it all quietly, without drama, without anyone suspecting I was capable of such strategic thinking. My phone rang. Nathaniel. I considered not answering, but curiosity won. Hello? Camila. His voice was strained. We need to talk. About what? About the house, about what you've done. My heart rate kicked up, but I kept my voice level. I don't know what you mean. Don't play games. The house on Riverside Court. You bought it. I bought a house, yes, I had to live somewhere. That's not just a house, that's the house Vanessa and I wanted. The house we looked at together. Did you? I had no idea. It was listed for sale, I made an offer, the seller accepted. Standard real estate transaction. Bullshit. You knew he wanted it. You bought it deliberately to what? To spite us? Don't be ridiculous, Nathaniel. Why would I care what house you and Vanessa wanted? I needed a place to live. I found a house I liked in a good neighborhood. The fact that it's near your house is just geography. It's 3 blocks away. So? It's a nice neighborhood. That's why you chose to live there too. I could hear him breathing heavily, trying to control his anger. In the background, I heard Vanessa's voice asking what was wrong. This is harassment, he said finally. You're harassing us by deliberately moving this close. No, Nathaniel. I'm living my life. If you feel harassed by my existence in the same neighborhood, that's your problem, not mine. Now if there's nothing else, there is something else. The garden. Vanessa's contractor came to give an estimate on removing it, and he found some of your plants tagged with little signs. Personal signs, with quotes and dates. I'd forgotten about those. Years ago, I'd marked my favorite roses with small metal tags, engraving them with dates and short quotes that held meaning for me. Sentimental, but I'd enjoyed the privacy of the gesture. So, I said, so it's creepy, like you marked your territory or something. The contractor asked if these were memorial plants, if someone had died. Remove them if they bother you, they're your plants now. That's not, he stopped, took a breath. Look, I'm trying to move on. Vanessa and I are trying to build a life together. This thing you're doing, living practically next door, it's making that difficult. Then move. Sell the house and go somewhere else. Problem solved. We're not selling. We just moved in. Then I guess you'll have to get used to having me as a neighbor. I paused. Nathaniel, you made your choices. You chose to have an affair, to file for divorce, to fight for the house in court. You won. You got everything you wanted. What more do you expect from me? Should I move to a different city entirely just to make you more comfortable? It would be nice if you'd consider our feelings. Your feelings? I laughed, surprising myself. You want me to consider your feelings? After you cheated on me for months? After you humiliated me in court? After you took the home I built? Now you want me to consider your feelings? I never meant to hurt you. Yes, you did. You just didn't want to feel guilty about it. I stood up, looking out at my garden, my deck, my house. I'm done with this conversation. Don't call me again unless it's absolutely necessary. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking. I'd let my anger show, let my composure slip. That was dangerous. I needed to stay cold and controlled, needed to maintain the image of the woman who'd moved on and was simply living her life. But God, it had felt good to tell him the truth. Monday morning, I woke at 5:30 and lay in bed for a moment, reorienting myself. New house, new bedroom, new life, and today, new job. I dressed carefully in clothes appropriate for teaching, slacks and a blouse, comfortable shoes, minimal jewelry. I pulled my hair back and looked at myself in the mirror, seeing someone I barely recognized. Not the doctor's wife anymore. Just Camila Winters, high school biology teacher. I liked her better. Lincoln High School looked exactly as I remembered it. Brick buildings arranged around a central quad, mature trees providing shade, students arriving in clusters of friends and cliques. I checked in at the main office and was given a schedule, a set of keys, and directions to my classroom. Room 204 was on the second floor of the science building. It smelled like chemicals and adolescence, that particular combination of lab supplies and teenage sweat that I'd forgotten about. The previous teacher had left materials organized neatly, with lesson plans and student rosters in a binder on the desk. I spent the first hour before classes started reviewing the plans and familiarizing myself with the lab equipment. Everything was where it should be, but I made mental notes about updating certain supplies and reorganizing storage for better efficiency. My first class was sophomore biology at 8:15. 23 students filed in, chattering and laughing, barely glancing at me. I let them settle, then stood at the front of the room and waited. Gradually, the noise died down as they noticed me watching. "Good morning," I said. "I'm Miss Winters, and I'll be your biology teacher for the rest of the semester. I know you've had a substitute for the past few weeks, and that's been disruptive. Starting today, we're going to get back on track." One student raised his hand. "What happened to Mr. Chen?" "He relocated for personal reasons. I'm his replacement." "Are you new?" a girl in the front asked. "New to you but not new to teaching. I taught here 15 years ago before most of you were born." That got some laughs and some calculations of age. "Now," I continued, "let's talk about expectations. I expect you to come to class prepared, to participate in discussions, to complete assignments on time, and to treat this lab space with respect. In return, I'll make biology as interesting and relevant as possible. Deal?" They nodded, some enthusiastic, some skeptical. "Great. Let's start with a lab. Everyone grab a partner and a dissection kit. We're looking at cellular structures today." The day flew by, in a blur of classes and lesson plans and relearning the rhythms of high school. By the time the final bell rang at 3, I was exhausted but energized in a way I hadn't been in years. This was real work, important work. Work that mattered beyond managing someone else's image and schedule. I was driving home when Harper called. "So, how was day 1? "Good. Great, actually. I forgot how much I love teaching." "I'm so proud of you, Cam. Starting over like this, getting back into your career, it's inspiring." "Thanks. It feels right. Have you had any trouble with Nathaniel and Vanessa being so close?" I'd told Harper about buying the house last week, and she'd been horrified. "That's too close," she'd said. "What if you run into them? What if it's awkward?" "It's fine," I told her now. "I haven't seen them. It's a big neighborhood. Still, be careful. I don't trust him not to make things difficult. He doesn't have any power over me anymore. That's the whole point of the divorce." We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment, looking at my house, my beautiful, perfect house that I'd bought with my own money and filled with my own things. A car drove slowly past, and I glanced up to see Nathaniel behind the wheel, staring at my house with an expression I couldn't quite read from this distance. Recognition? Anger? Regret? I didn't acknowledge him. I just got out of my car and walked up my front steps like he didn't exist, like his presence 3 blocks away didn't affect me at all. But inside, I was smiling. 3 weeks into my new life, I'd established a routine that felt both foreign and right. Wake at 5:30, grade papers or prep lessons, teach all day, come home to my house and my garden and my solitude. On weekends, I worked on home improvements, painting rooms, organizing closets, making the space truly mine. Harper visited once, finally, and her reaction was everything I'd hoped for. "This isn't an apartment," she said, standing in my living room with her mouth open. "This is a house, a really nice house." "I know. Why did you lie about getting an apartment?" "I didn't lie. I just didn't correct your assumption." She walked through the rooms, touching furniture, examining details. "Cam, this must have cost. How did you afford this?" "My investments, the ones Nathaniel never paid attention to. But these must have been worth almost $2 million, yes." She sat down heavily on my couch. "I had no idea. I thought you were getting by on alimony and whatever small savings you had. I was worried you were struggling financially." "I know. I'm sorry I let you worry, but I needed to keep this quiet until after the divorce was final." "Why?" "Because Nathaniel's lawyer didn't look closely at the investment accounts. They saw a portfolio and a rough value, but they didn't dig into the actual worth. If they had, they would have fought for a bigger share." So you hid assets? I didn't hide anything. Everything was disclosed in discovery. I just didn't advertise it, and Nathaniel's lawyer was too focused on the house and the practice to investigate thoroughly. Harper processed this. You played them. I outmaneuvered them. Legally and ethically. The accounts were all in my name, established with money I'd managed over the years. Community property rules are complicated, and with good documentation and the right legal structure, I was able to keep most of it. She paused, then smiled. That's brilliant, actually. All this time you've been 10 steps ahead. I had to be. Nathaniel held all the obvious power, the income, the career, the connections. I needed different advantages. And this house, the one he wanted? Strategic positioning. He took my home. I took his dream home. Fair trade. Harper laughed, actually laughed, for the first time since the divorce had started. I've been feeling so sorry for you. Poor Camila, losing everything in the divorce. And meanwhile, you've been executing some kind of master plan. I prefer to think of it as careful planning. Does he know about the money? Not the full extent. They'll figure it out eventually, but by then it'll be too late to do anything about it. And the house on Willow Creek? He doesn't suspect anything's wrong with it. I'd told Harper about the foundation issues last week, needing to share the truth with someone. She'd been shocked, but also grimly satisfied. Not yet. It'll be a few more months before the damage becomes obvious. What if he tries to sue you? He won't be able to prove I knew. The inspection report he has shows no issues. And even if he somehow discovered I had a different report, I have a cover story ready. You've thought of everything. I've had 8 months to think. She stood and hugged me. I'm proud of you, and a little scared of you, honestly, but mostly proud. I'm just protecting myself. That's all I've ever been doing. After Harper left, I sat in my living room and thought about what I'd become. Was I a good person? Probably not. I'd hidden information, manipulated outcomes, set traps for my ex-husband to fall into. But was I okay with that? Absolutely. Because Nathaniel had been given every opportunity to do the right thing. To be honest about his affair. To split assets fairly. To show even minimal consideration for the woman who'd supported his career for 15 years. Instead, he'd chosen cruelty. He'd humiliated me in court, taken my home, and paraded his affair in front of me like it was something to celebrate. So I'd responded with strategy instead of tears. With planning instead of pleading. With the kind of cold intelligence that he'd never thought me capable of. Let him live in his rapidly deteriorating house. Let him discover that getting what you want sometimes means getting more than you bargained for. Let him learn that the person you dismiss as powerless might be the most dangerous person in the room. November brought cold rain and the first hints of winter. My garden began its dormancy, and I spent evenings reading by the fireplace, grading papers, enjoying the solitude I'd once feared. Teaching had become the anchor of my new life. My students were challenging and funny, and occasionally brilliant, reminding me why I'd loved this profession in the first place. I developed new lesson plans, introduced hands-on experiments, connected biology to real-world issues they cared about. Dr. Martinez stopped by my classroom one afternoon after school. Your students are talking, she said, leaning against my desk. Good things. They say you're tough but fair, that they're actually learning. I'm glad to hear it. There's a full-time position opening up for next year. Regular contract, not just filling in. Would you be interested? Absolutely. Good, I'll put you forward for it. She glanced at the photos I'd put up on my bulletin board, nature shots I'd taken in my new garden. You seem happy, Camila. Happier than I remember from before. I am happy, strange as that sounds after a divorce. Not strange at all. Sometimes ending something painful is the beginning of something better. She smiled. I'm glad you came back to us. After she left, I stayed late organizing lab supplies and planning the next week's lessons. It was past 6 when I finally locked up my classroom and walked to the parking lot. Nathaniel's car was waiting near mine. He got out when he saw me approaching, and I considered just getting in my car and leaving. But curiosity made me stop. This is borderline stalking, I said. I need to talk to you. So call or email. Don't ambush me at work. You don't answer my calls. Because we have nothing to discuss. We do, actually. He looked exhausted. I noticed dark circles under his eyes, lines of stress around his mouth. There's something wrong with the house. My heart rate spiked, but I kept my expression neutral. What kind of something? I don't know. Doors aren't closing right, cracks in the walls. The contractor I brought in said it might be foundation issues. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate? Camila, this is serious. Foundation repair costs a fortune. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Did you know? He stepped closer. Before the divorce? Did you know there was a problem? How would I know? I'm not a contractor. You managed everything, all the maintenance, all the repairs? If anyone would know. I had an inspection done when we refinanced. You have that report. It showed everything was fine. Then why? Nathaniel, I don't know what to tell you. Houses need maintenance. Maybe something's changed in the past 2 years. Maybe the contractor is wrong. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. It's your house now. This feels like sabotage. I laughed, genuinely amused. Sabotage? You think I somehow damaged the foundation of my own house just to spite you? That's paranoid even for you. I don't know what to think. All I know is I just spent everything I had on the divorce and buying you out, and now I'm looking at hundreds of thousands in repairs. Again, not my problem. You wanted the house, you fought for the house, you won. Congratulations. Camila. Dr. Crane, I corrected. We're not married anymore. We're not friends. We're barely civil acquaintances. Dr. Crane, I corrected. We're not married anymore. We're not friends, we're barely civil acquaintances, so unless you have something that actually requires my input, I'm going home now. You're enjoying this, he said, his voice bitter, watching me struggle. I'm indifferent to it. There's a difference. I unlocked my car. Now please move. I have papers to grade. He stepped back, and I got in my car and drove away without looking back. But my hands were shaking on the steering wheel, adrenaline flooding my system. He suspected. Not enough to prove anything, not enough to take action, but enough to be questioning. I needed to be more careful, needed to maintain my composure even more perfectly than before. At home, I poured myself wine and sat on the deck despite the cold, replaying the conversation and analyzing every word. Had I said anything incriminating? Had I revealed knowledge I shouldn't have? No. I'd been surprised, but not too surprised. Sympathetic, but not overly so. I'd referenced the inspection report that was in the house files, the clean one that showed no issues. I was safe. For now, but I needed to be ready in case he pushed harder. I needed to have my story perfectly straight, my documentation organized, my defense prepared. I went to my office and pulled out the folder I'd labeled insurance. Not the insurance for the house, but insurance for me. Inside was the original inspection report, the one showing foundation concerns. Also included, a letter I'd written to myself, dated 3 weeks ago, describing how I'd just received this report from the inspection company, how they'd apologized for a filing error that had delayed sending it, how shocked I was to learn there had been concerns. It was backdated and notarized by a notary I'd paid extra to be discreet. If Nathaniel sued, if he somehow proved I'd known about the foundation issues, I'd produce this letter. I'd claim I'd received the report after the divorce was final, that I'd been about to contact him about it when he'd confronted me. Plausible deniability. Always have an exit strategy. My phone buzzed with a text from Harper. Everything okay? You usually call by now. I'd been calling her every few days, maintaining the illusion of the struggling divorcee who needed emotional support. It was partly true, I did need someone to talk to, but it was also strategic. The more people saw me as a victim, the less they'd suspect I was an architect of revenge. Long day, I texted back. Teaching is exhausting. Call you tomorrow? Of course, love you. Love you too. I put my phone down and returned to my wine and my thoughts. Was this who I'd become? Someone who staged evidence, maintained elaborate covers, manipulated perceptions? Someone who'd deliberately concealed property defects and was now watching her ex-husband struggle with the consequences? Yes. And I was okay with it, because the alternative had been to be the victim. To accept the role Nathaniel had assigned me, the discarded wife, the woman who'd sacrificed everything and gotten nothing, the cautionary tale other women would whisper about at parties. I'd refused that role. I'd written my own script instead. And if that made me a bad person, at least I was a bad person with a beautiful house and a meaningful career and $2 million in investment accounts. December arrived with unexpected snow transforming the city into a winter postcard. My students were restless with holiday anticipation, and I found myself enjoying their energy rather than fighting it. We did experiments with ice crystals, discussed evolutionary adaptations to cold climates, watched nature documentaries about Arctic ecosystems. On the last day before winter break, several students brought me gifts: homemade cookies, candy canes, a mug that said, "Biology, it's in my DNA." I was touched by the gesture, by the evidence that I'd connected with them in just a few months. "You're a cool teacher, Miss Winters," one of my sophomores said as she left. "Way better than the substitute." "Thank you, Emma. That means a lot." "Are you doing anything fun for the holidays?" The question caught me off guard. Last year, I'd spent the holidays hosting elaborate parties and dinners, playing the perfect doctor's wife. This year, I had no plans beyond reading, cooking for myself, and enjoying the solitude. "Just relaxing," I told her. "Sometimes that's the best gift." After the students left, I sat in my empty classroom and felt a wave of unexpected emotion. Not sadness exactly, more like acknowledgement of how much had changed in a single year. Last December, I'd been married, living in my Willow Creek house, maintaining the facade of a perfect life. I'd known about Nathaniel's affair, but hadn't confronted it yet. I'd been planning and preparing, but I'd still been trapped in the old story. This December, I was divorced, living in my own house, teaching again, completely independent. The facade was gone, replaced by something more authentic and harder won. My phone rang. An unknown number, but I answered anyway. "Miss Winters, this is James Bradford." "My lawyer. Why was he calling during the holidays?" "Hello, James. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to give you a heads up. I received a letter from Nathaniel Crane's attorney this morning. They're threatening legal action over the house on Willow Creek." My stomach tightened. "On what grounds?" "They claim you had knowledge of material defects and failed to disclose them. They're alleging fraud and requesting damages for repair costs." "I see. Do you have documentation? Anything that shows you didn't know about foundation issues?" "I have the inspection report that was done 2 years ago. It's clean, no mention of foundation problems." "Good. That's good. But they're claiming you must have known something based on how thoroughly you managed the property. They're pushing pretty hard." I thought about my insurance folder, my notarized letter, my carefully constructed cover story. Was it time to deploy it? "What do you recommend?" I asked. "Let me draft a response. We'll point to the inspection report, emphasize that you're not a structural engineer, note that any issues developed after the report was completed. We'll make it clear that pursuing this will be expensive and unlikely to succeed." "Do you think they'll actually sue?" "Doubtful. Proving you had knowledge would be nearly impossible, and the costs of litigation would probably exceed what they'd recover even if they won. This is likely a pressure tactic, trying to scare you into settling." "I'm not interested in settling. I didn't think you would be. But be prepared for this to drag out over the next few months. They may hire forensic accountants, property inspectors, try to build a case. It'll be unpleasant." "I can handle unpleasant." "I'm sure you can. I'll send you a draft of our response by the end of the week. In the meantime, don't talk to Nathaniel or his attorney. All communication goes through me." "Understood. Thank you, James." After hanging up, I sat with the phone in my hand, processing. So it was happening: the pushback, the accusation, the attempt to make me responsible for his problems. I'd known this might come. I'd planned for it. But actually facing it made my heart race and my palms sweat. I pulled out my insurance folder and reviewed its contents one more time. The original inspection report with the foundation concerns. The backdated letter claiming I'd just received it. The notary's stamp that gave it official credibility. The timeline that showed the letter was dated before Nathaniel had confronted me, which meant I hadn't created it in response to his threats. It was airtight, or as airtight as a manufactured defense could be. The question was whether to deploy it now or wait. If I produced the letter immediately, it would look reactive, like I was scrambling to create a defense. Better to wait, to let them dig themselves deeper into their accusations, and then produce it at exactly the right moment for maximum impact. Patience. Strategy. Cold calculation. I'd spent 8 months being patient. I could manage a few more. Christmas Eve found me alone in my house, which should have been depressing but somehow wasn't. I'd declined Harper's invitation to join her family, claiming I needed time to myself. She'd protested, but ultimately understood. "You've been through a lot," she'd said. "Sometimes solitude is healing." If she only knew that solitude was exactly what I wanted. Space to think, to plan, to exist without performing for anyone. I made myself a nice dinner, salmon with roasted vegetables, a glass of good wine, and ate at my dining table while reading a novel I'd been saving. Outside, snow fell softly, blanketing the neighborhood in silence. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Merry Christmas. I hope you're suffering. Vanessa." Somehow she'd gotten my new number and decided to spend Christmas Eve sending anonymous hate mail. I deleted the message without responding. Let her have her petty victory. Let her think I was suffering while she celebrated with Nathaniel in the house I'd left them. A house that was slowly falling apart beneath their feet. The next morning, Christmas, I woke to more snow and an email from James Bradford. Draft response attached. Review and let me know if you want any changes before I send. I opened the attachment over coffee. The letter was perfect, professional but firm, pointing out the weaknesses in Nathaniel's case while making it clear that I wouldn't be intimidated into settling. "Approved," I emailed back. "Send it when you're ready." "Merry Christmas to you too," he replied. "We'll get through this." Harper called midday to check on me, and we talked for an hour about nothing important. Her kids, Kyle's family dinner disasters, her mother-in-law's passive-aggressive comments. It was nice to be the listener rather than the subject of concern. "How are you really?" she asked eventually. "Be honest." "I'm good. Really good, actually. I know that's probably weird to say, but I feel more myself than I have in years." "That's not weird at all. Sometimes losing what we thought we wanted helps us find what we actually need." "Exactly." "And the house? You're still loving it?" "I love it. It's perfect." "Have you run into Nathaniel or Vanessa?" "Not directly. I've seen his car a few times, but we don't talk." "Good. He doesn't deserve your time or energy." After hanging up, I spent the rest of Christmas Day reading, napping, and enjoying the peaceful solitude of my home. It was the best Christmas I'd had in years. No hosting, no performing, no pretending to be someone I wasn't. Just me, my books, my house, and my carefully executed plans. January arrived with bitter cold and the return to school. My students were sluggish after break, but I'd planned engaging lessons that gradually pulled them back into learning mode. We started a unit on genetics, using real-world examples and hands-on activities to make the concepts stick. On the second day back, Dr. Martinez called me to her office during my planning period. "I wanted to update you on the full-time position," she said. "The school board approved it at their December meeting. If you're still interested, the job is yours starting next fall." "I'm absolutely interested." "Excellent. HR will send you the contract paperwork next week." She leaned back in her chair. "You've been a wonderful addition to our faculty, Camila. The students respect you, your colleagues speak highly of you, and your test scores are already improving. We're lucky to have you back." "Thank you. That means everything." Walking back to my classroom, I felt a surge of pride. I had a career again. Not just a job to fill time, but a profession I was good at and cared about. Something that was mine, independent of anyone else. That afternoon, I received an email from James Bradford. "Update on the case. Nathaniel's lawyer backed down after receiving our response. They're dropping the fraud claim. Congratulations." I read the email 3 times, making sure I understood correctly. They'd given up. After all the threats and accusations, they'd looked at the evidence and realized they couldn't win. Or more likely, they'd realized how expensive it would be to try. I wanted to celebrate, but I kept my reaction private. No calls to Harper, no victory dances, no sharing the news. This was my win, quiet and complete, and sharing it would only invite questions about why I seemed so satisfied. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine that evening and sat by my fireplace, letting the reality sink in. Nathaniel had tried to make me pay for his house problems, and he'd failed. The foundation issues were his responsibility now, completely and legally. My revenge was working exactly as planned. February brought a thaw and the first hints of spring. My garden began showing signs of life, early bulbs pushing through the snow, buds forming on the trees. I spent weekends planning this year's planting, researching native species and perennials that would thrive with minimal maintenance. One Saturday afternoon, I was outside pruning dead branches when a car pulled up in front of my house. I didn't recognize it at first, but when the driver emerged, my stomach dropped. Vanessa. She walked up my driveway with the confidence of someone who thought she belonged everywhere. She wore expensive athleisure wear and carried a designer handbag that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. "Camila," she said, as if we were old friends. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by." "Actually, I do. What do you want?" I wanted to talk, woman to woman, without Nathaniel or lawyers involved. About what? About the house, about what you did. I set down my pruning shears carefully. "I didn't do anything. Your contractor found foundation issues. That's unfortunate, but it's not my fault." "Nathaniel says you must have known that you managed everything too carefully not to know." "Nathaniel is wrong. But even if I had known, what exactly do you think I owed you? You're the woman he left me for. Did you expect me to help you steal my life and then warn you about potential problems?" She flinched. "I didn't steal anything. Nathaniel and I fell in love. These things happen. These things happen when people make choices. You chose to sleep with a married man. He chose to be your wife. Those were conscious decisions, not accidents. You're bitter. I'm honest. There's a difference." She looked at my house, at my garden, and I saw something flicker across her face. Jealousy? Regret? "This is the house we wanted." "I know. You bought it deliberately. To hurt us." "No, I bought it because I liked it. The fact that it bothers you is just a bonus. Nathaniel says you're obsessed with him, that buying this house and living so close is evidence of some kind of stalking." I laughed, genuinely amused. "Let me get this straight. I'm obsessed with the man who cheated on me, divorced me, and took my house? The man I avoid whenever possible? That's your theory? Then why live here?" "Because it's a beautiful neighborhood with good property values, and this house is perfect for me. Your presence 3 blocks away is irrelevant to my decision-making." She studied me for a long moment, as if trying to figure out whether I was telling the truth. "The foundation repairs are going to cost over $300,000. Nathaniel had to take out a second mortgage. We might have to sell." "That's unfortunate. Is that all you have to say?" "What else would I say? I'm sorry you're dealing with expensive home repairs, but that's part of home ownership. Things break. Things need fixing. Sometimes it's costly." "You're not sorry at all." "You're right. I'm not. You helped destroy my marriage and then moved into my house. Forgive me if I'm not overflowing with sympathy about your financial troubles." She looked like she wanted to say more, but something in my expression must have stopped her. Instead, she turned and walked back to her car, her expensive shoes clicking against my driveway. I watched her drive away, then returned to my pruning. My hands were steady. My heart rate was normal. I felt nothing except mild satisfaction that she'd had to face me, had to admit that things weren't as perfect as they'd seemed. That evening, Nathaniel called. I let it go to voicemail. "Camila, Vanessa told me about your conversation today. I need you to understand something. We're struggling financially because of these repairs. If you knew about the foundation issues and didn't disclose them, that's fraud. I don't want to sue you, but I will if necessary. Just think about what's right here. Call me back." I deleted the message without responding. What's right? He wanted to lecture me about what was right? I'd spent 15 years doing what was right, being the supportive wife, the perfect hostess, the woman who gave up her career for his. And he'd repaid that by cheating on me and humiliating me in court. Now he wanted mercy. He wanted me to feel guilty, to offer to help pay for repairs, to take responsibility for problems that were actually his fault. But I'd stopped being the woman who did what was expected. I'd become someone else, someone harder, colder, more strategic. Someone who understood that sometimes the right thing was making sure the people who hurt you faced consequences. March brought warmer weather and the kind of clear, bright days that made everything feel possible. My garden exploded with color. Crocuses, daffodils, early tulips. I spent my weekends working the soil, planting new perennials, creating the kind of space I'd always wanted but never had time for when I was maintaining Nathaniel's image. At school, my students were preparing for state testing. We reviewed genetics, cellular biology, ecology, all the major concepts they'd need to know. They were anxious but prepared, and I felt confident they'd do well. Miss Winters, one of my juniors, asked after class one day, "Why did you quit teaching before? Like, 15 years ago?" "I got married. My husband needed help with his medical practice, and I thought supporting his career was more important than mine." "That's dumb. No offense," I laughed. "No offense taken. You're right, it was dumb. But sometimes we make choices that seem right at the time and only realize later they were mistakes." "So you regret it?" "I regret giving up something I loved. I don't regret learning from the experience." "What did you learn?" "That you can't build your identity on someone else's success. You have to build your own." She thought about that. "That's actually pretty deep, Miss Winters. Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation for being just a biology nerd." On a Friday afternoon in mid-March, I was leaving school when I noticed Nathaniel's car in the parking lot again. This was becoming a pattern. Him showing up uninvited, trying to corner me into conversations I didn't want to have. But this time, he wasn't alone. Vanessa was in the passenger seat. I considered just driving away, but he got out and approached my car before I could leave. "We need to talk," he said. "No, we don't. Please, just 5 minutes." Vanessa got out too, and the two of them stood by my car like I was a hostage negotiation they were trying to resolve. "Fine, 5 minutes." I didn't get out of my car. Nathaniel crouched down to my window level. "We're selling the house. The repairs are too expensive, and we can't afford them on top of the mortgage." "Okay. But there's a problem. Because of the foundation issues, we can't sell it for what we paid. We're going to take a huge loss." "That's unfortunate." "Camila, please. We need your help." "My help? With what?" "With money, with the repairs, with anything. You have investments, right? The ones from the divorce, maybe you could loan us." "No. Just hear me out." "No. I'm not loaning you money. I'm not helping with repairs. I'm not doing anything to make your situation easier. You made your choices. Live with them." Vanessa spoke up. "He's gonna lose everything. The house, the practice. He's drowning in debt." "Then let him drown. That's not my problem." "How can you be so cold?" she asked. "You were married to him for 15 years. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It meant something when we were married. It means nothing now. He made sure of that when he chose you over our vows." Nathaniel's face had gone red. "This is revenge, isn't it? All of it. Buying this house, refusing to help, watching us struggle. You're enjoying this." "I'm not enjoying it. I'm indifferent to it." "There's a difference." "I don't believe you. I think you planned this somehow. I think you knew about the foundation and hid it, and now you're sitting back watching us pay for it." "Prove it." "What?" "You heard me. Prove I knew. Prove I hid anything. Prove that I'm responsible for your problems in any way. Because unless you can prove it, with evidence that would hold up in court, you need to stop harassing me and figure out your own solutions." I started my car, forcing him to step back. Vanessa looked like she was on the verge of tears, but I couldn't bring myself to care. "We could lose everything," Nathaniel said, his voice desperate. "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" I looked at him through my car window. This man I'd loved, this man I'd supported, this man who'd thrown me away when someone younger and prettier came along. "It means the universe has a sense of justice after all," I said. Then I drove away, leaving them standing in the parking lot. That weekend I treated myself to something frivolous. A complete garden redesign consultation. I hired a landscape architect who spent 3 hours walking my property, taking notes, discussing my vision. "You have good bones here," she said, gesturing to the existing plants. "The previous owner knew what they were doing. But we can enhance it, create distinct areas, add some architectural elements. I want it to be beautiful but low maintenance. I don't have unlimited time." "Perennials and native plants, then. Once they're established, they practically take care of themselves." We spent the afternoon planning flower beds, a small water feature, a flagstone path through the garden. The cost would be significant, about $15,000, but I could afford it. My investments continued to grow. My teacher's salary covered my basic expenses, and the alimony payments from Nathaniel, while small, were just enough to fund extras like this. "When do you want to start?" the landscape architect asked as she was leaving. "Early April, if possible, before things get too warm." Perfect. I'll send you a detailed proposal and timeline by Monday. After she left, I sat on my deck and imagined what the space would look like when finished. My garden, designed to my specifications, reflecting my taste and priorities. Not a garden I was maintaining for someone else's image, but one I was creating for my own joy. This was what winning looked like. Not crushing your enemies, though that was satisfying too. But building something beautiful from the ruins of what you'd lost. Transforming pain into purpose, betrayal into independence. My phone rang. Harper. Hey, what are you up to? She asked. Just finished meeting with a landscape architect. I'm redoing the garden. That sounds expensive. It is, but I can afford it, and I want it. Good for you. You deserve nice things. She paused. Have you heard anything from Nathaniel lately? He and Vanessa showed up at my school yesterday, asking for money to help with the house repairs. Please tell me you said no. I said no. Good. That's not your responsibility. He made his bed, now he can lie in it, or fall through it if the foundation collapses. I laughed. You're terrible. I'm realistic. He treated you like garbage and now he wants you to bail him out? That's rich. He thinks I'm being vindictive. Are you? I considered the question. Was I vindictive? Or was I just protecting myself and my resources from someone who'd already taken so much? I'm being rational, I said finally. I don't owe him anything. Not help, not sympathy, not money. The divorce was supposed to sever our financial connection. I'm just maintaining that boundary. That's not vindictive. That's healthy. After hanging up, I thought about Harper's question. Was I vindictive? Maybe a little. But more than that, I was strategic. I'd spent 8 months planning my exit and my revenge, and now I was watching it play out exactly as designed. That wasn't vindictiveness. It was follow-through. Nathaniel had gambled that he could discard me without consequences. He was learning that gamble had been a mistake. April arrived with cherry blossoms and the beginning of my garden renovation. The landscape crew arrived early Monday morning, and for the next 2 weeks, my backyard was a construction zone of dug beds, delivered plants, and careful installation. I watched the transformation during my evenings and weekends, fascinated by how quickly the space was changing. New perennials filled gaps left by winter. The water feature took shape, a small pond with a fountain, surrounded by river rocks and shade plants. The flagstone path wound through the beds, creating an invitation to explore. You're gonna love this when it's finished. The landscape architect said during one of her check-ins. It's going to be a real sanctuary. She was right. By the end of April, my garden was transformed into something magazine-worthy. I spent evenings sitting by the pond, listening to the fountain, watching birds discover the water, feeling more at peace than I had in years. The house on Willow Creek sold in late April, though not for what Nathaniel had hoped. I learned this from Harper, who heard it from someone at the hospital, who knew someone who knew Vanessa. They lost almost $100,000 on the sale, Harper reported during one of our weekend coffee dates. After paying off the mortgage and the second loan, they barely broke even, and they still owe contractors for work that's not finished. Where are they moving? An apartment, apparently, something small across town. An apartment. After fighting so hard for the house, after taking it from me in court, after moving in with such triumph, they were ending up in an apartment anyway. The irony was perfect. How do you feel about that? Harper asked, watching my face carefully. Satisfied. Not gleeful, just satisfied. Like the universe corrected an imbalance. You're not worried he'll come after you again? Try to prove you knew about the foundation? He can't prove what isn't provable, and even if he could, the cost of litigation would exceed whatever he might recover. He's done. Good. He deserves to be done. That evening, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simple. I'm sorry. I almost deleted it without opening, but curiosity won. Camila, I know you have no reason to read this, let alone believe it, but I wanted to apologize. Not because I'm looking for forgiveness or trying to ease my guilt, but because you deserve to hear it. I made terrible choices. I hurt you in ways I'll never be able to undo. I convinced myself at the time that I was just following my heart, that love justified everything. But I was wrong. I destroyed a good woman's life because I was selfish and foolish. Nathaniel and I are separating. The stress of the house, the money problems, the constant arguments, we couldn't survive it. Turns out a relationship built on betrayal doesn't have a strong foundation. The irony isn't lost on me. I don't expect you to care about my problems. I wouldn't blame you if you took pleasure in them. But I wanted you to know that you were right about everything. About him, about us, about what we deserved. I'm sorry I was part of hurting you. I'm sorry I didn't think about what it would feel like to be you, watching your marriage end while the other woman moved into your home. I'm sorry I sent you that hateful text on Christmas. I'm sorry for all of it. You've rebuilt your life beautifully. Everyone who knows you says you're happier now than you were before. I hope that's true. I hope you found peace. Vanessa. I read the email 3 times, trying to determine whether it was genuine or manipulative. Whether she really meant it or was trying to set me up for something. Ultimately, it didn't matter. Her apology didn't change anything. It didn't undo the affair or the divorce or the year of planning revenge. It was just words, and words were cheap. I deleted the email without responding. May brought final exams and end-of-year chaos at school. My students took their state tests, and I spent long hours grading final projects and submitting grades. It was exhausting but satisfying. The kind of tired that comes from meaningful work rather than meaningless performance. On the last day of school, Dr. Martinez gathered the faculty for an end-of-year celebration. There was cake, cheap wine, and the kind of relieved laughter that comes from surviving another academic year. Before everyone leaves, Dr. Martinez announced, "I want to recognize a few people who went above and beyond this year." She listed names. Teachers who'd sponsored clubs, coaches who'd led teams to championships, counselors who'd helped students navigate crises. And finally, she said, "I want to thank Camila Winters for stepping into a difficult situation mid-year and not just surviving but thriving. Your students' test scores were among the highest in the department, and more importantly, they loved having you as their teacher. We're lucky you came back to us." The room applauded, and I felt genuinely moved. This was success that mattered, not dinner parties or maintaining someone's image, but actual impact on real people's lives. After the celebration, I drove home to my beautiful house with its perfect garden and its complete absence of anyone else's expectations. I poured wine, ordered takeout, and sat on my deck watching fireflies emerge as darkness fell. This was the life I'd built. Quiet, independent, meaningful. No husband to perform for, no social obligations to maintain, no pretense to uphold. Just me, my work, my home, and my carefully guarded peace. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. "Miss Winters?" "This is Detective Paulson with the City Police. I'm calling about a complaint filed by Mr. Nathaniel Crane." My stomach dropped. "What kind of complaint?" "He's alleging fraud related to a property sale. Claims you knowingly concealed defects in a house you sold him. Is that something we can discuss?" "I'd prefer to have my attorney present." "That's your right. But I'll tell you up front, I've looked at the evidence he provided, and it's pretty thin. An inspection report that shows no issues, no documentation of you knowing about problems, just speculation and circumstantial claims." "So why are you calling?" "Professional courtesy. Sometimes these domestic disputes escalate, and I like to get ahead of them. Mr. Crane seems convinced you deliberately sabotaged him. Is there any truth to that?" I thought about my answer carefully. "Detective, I was married to Mr. Crane for 15 years. We divorced, and he was awarded the house in the settlement. After I moved out, he discovered foundation issues. That's unfortunate, but I had no knowledge of any problems before leaving. The inspection report he has proves that. He says you must have known because you managed all the property maintenance." "Managing maintenance doesn't make me a structural engineer. If the foundation was deteriorating, I wouldn't have known without a professional inspection." "Fair enough. And you wouldn't have any reason to deliberately damage your own house just to spite him during a divorce? That would be insane and expensive and pointless since I'd be damaging my own asset." "That's what I thought." He paused. "Look, between you and me, this smells like a desperate man trying to blame his ex-wife for his own financial problems. Unless he comes up with actual evidence, and I mean real evidence, not just suspicions, I'm not pursuing it further. I appreciate you letting me know. Just keep your distance from him. These things can get ugly and I'd hate to see anyone get hurt." "Understood." After hanging up, I sat very still, processing. Nathaniel had gone to the police. He was desperate enough to try criminal charges, but the detective had seen through it, seen the lack of evidence, the appearance of a bitter ex-husband making accusations he couldn't support. I was safe. My planning had worked. The inspection report, the plausible deniability, the careful timeline, all of it held up under scrutiny. But I needed to be more careful going forward. No more direct confrontations, no more responding to his attempts at contact. Complete separation was the only way to protect myself. I texted James Bradford. Police called about complaint from Nathaniel. Detective doesn't seem to be pursuing it, but wanted you to know. His response was quick. Thanks for the heads up. Forward me the detective's name and contact info. I'll reach out and make sure they understand the situation. You did nothing wrong. Nothing wrong might be stretching it, but legally wrong? No. I'd been careful about that. I'd been very, very careful about everything. Summer arrived with heat and humidity and the blessed freedom of no lesson planning. I spent my days reading, working in my garden, taking long walks through my neighborhood. Sometimes I saw Nathaniel's car. He still had to drive through our area to get to his medical practice, but we never acknowledged each other. Harper invited me to her family's 4th of July barbecue, and I went, enjoying time with her kids and Kyle's extended family. People asked about my divorce in that careful way people do, and I gave careful answers. It was difficult but necessary. I'm much happier now. Sometimes endings are actually beginnings. All true, as far as it went. In mid-July, I got a letter from James Bradford. Inside was a copy of a legal filing, Nathaniel formally dropping all claims against me. In mid-July, I got a letter from James Bradford. Inside was a copy of a legal filing, Nathaniel formally dropping all claims against me, along with a signed agreement that neither party would pursue further litigation related to the divorce or property division. A cover letter from James explained, his attorney finally convinced him that pursuing you was futile and expensive. This document closes the door permanently. Congratulations, Camila. You're free. Free. The word sat heavy with meaning. I was free from Nathaniel's accusations, free from the threat of legal action, free from having to maintain my elaborate defenses. The game was over, and I'd won so completely that my opponent had surrendered. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt oddly hollow. I sat on my deck that evening, the legal documents spread on the table beside me, and tried to understand my own reaction. I'd spent a year planning revenge, executing it perfectly, watching it unfold exactly as designed. Nathaniel had lost the house, lost his financial stability, lost his relationship with Vanessa, and now he'd lost the ability to even blame me for any of it. It was everything I'd wanted. So why did it feel incomplete? Maybe because revenge, for all its satisfactions, doesn't actually heal anything. It balances the scales, but it doesn't erase the pain that made you need balance in the first place. I'd won. But what exactly had I won? My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Tyler, my realtor. Camila, I hope I'm not bothering you. I wanted to let you know, the house next door to you is going on the market. The owners are retiring and moving to Florida. I thought you might be interested in knowing. Why would I be interested? Well, you've done such beautiful work on your place. I thought maybe you'd want to know who your future neighbors will be. Or? He paused. This is going to sound crazy, but you could buy it as an investment property or for future resale. The market's strong right now. I don't need 2 houses, Tyler. I know, but think about it. You could rent it, or flip it, or just hold on to it until the market peaks. Your finances are solid. You could easily afford it. After hanging up, I thought about his suggestion. It was ridiculous, really. I didn't need another house. I didn't want to be a landlord. And yet, the idea of controlling more of my environment, of ensuring my sanctuary stayed peaceful, of having options, it was appealing in a way I couldn't quite articulate. I was still thinking about it when Harper called. Did you hear? She asked without preamble. Hear what? Nathaniel's practice is closing. He couldn't maintain the overhead with all his financial problems. He's taking a position at the hospital as a staff physician. A staff physician. After years of being the successful private practitioner, the man with his own office and his own schedule, he was becoming an employee. The kind of position he'd always looked down on, claiming it was for doctors who couldn't make it on their own. "How did you find out?" I asked. "It's hospital gossip. Everyone's talking about it. Apparently he's been struggling for months, and this was the only way to generate steady income and get health insurance again." "And Vanessa?" "Gone. From what I hear. Moved back to her parents' place in another state. She and Nathaniel officially ended things last month." So it was complete. The affair had imploded, the house was gone, the practice was closing, and Nathaniel was starting over from a position significantly lower than where he'd been when he decided to blow up his marriage. "Are you happy?" Harper asked. "About how things turned out for him?" "I don't know if happy is the right word. Satisfied, maybe. He made choices that had consequences. That's all that happened." "That's very diplomatic of you. I'm happy for you. I think he got what he deserved." After hanging up, I poured wine and walked through my house, my beautiful, perfect house that I'd bought with my own money and filled with my own choices. Every room reflected my taste, my priorities, my vision. There was no one else's influence here, no compromises, no accommodations for someone else's needs. This was winning. Not Nathaniel's downfall, though that was satisfying. But this, having a life that was entirely mine, built on my own terms, reflecting my own values. And yet, there was still that hollowness, that sense of something missing. I'd spent a year focused on revenge and rebuilding. I'd accomplished both. But now what? What came after revenge? What came after proving I could survive and thrive? I didn't have an answer yet, but I had time to figure it out. August brought preparations for the new school year. I spent long days at school setting up my classroom, reviewing curriculum, meeting with other teachers to plan interdisciplinary projects. This year, I'd have my own room, my own established routines, my own reputation. I wouldn't be the new teacher filling in anymore. I'd be Miss Winters, the biology teacher everyone wanted because she was tough but fair, challenging but supportive. The first day of school arrived with familiar butterflies. New students filed into my classroom, and I saw the usual mix of expressions: curiosity, anxiety, defiance, enthusiasm. I let them settle, then introduced myself the same way I had last year. "I'm Miss Winters, and this is biology. I expect you to work hard, participate actively, and treat this lab with respect. In return, I'll make this class as interesting and relevant as possible. Deal?" They nodded, and we began. By October, I'd settled into a comfortable rhythm. Teaching during the day, grading in the evenings, spending weekends maintaining my garden, and reading for pleasure. I'd joined a book club at the local library and started volunteering at a community garden on Sunday mornings. My life was full in a way it had never been during my marriage. Not full of social obligations or performances, but full of genuine connections and meaningful activities. Harper noticed the change during one of our coffee dates. "You seem different," she said. "Lighter, somehow." "I feel lighter. Like I finally figured out who I actually am instead of who I thought I should be." "Do you ever think about dating again?" The question surprised me. "Not really. I'm not opposed to it, but I'm also not looking. I like my life as it is." "Fair enough. You've earned the right to be selfish with your time and energy." "It's not even about being selfish. It's about being complete on my own. If I meet someone eventually, great. But I don't need someone to feel whole anymore." "That's really healthy. I'm proud of you, Cam." Later that week, I received a letter. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Nathaniel's. I considered throwing it away unopened. But curiosity won. "Camila, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I understand why. But I've been in therapy for the past few months, working through everything that happened, and my therapist suggested I write this letter. Whether you read it or not is up to you. I was wrong. About everything. About the affair, about how I treated you during the divorce, about blaming you for the house problems. I was desperate and scared and looking for someone to blame besides myself. The truth is, I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was bored and arrogant and stupid enough to think that excitement was more important than loyalty. Vanessa wasn't the problem. I was. I would have sabotaged any relationship because I didn't know how to appreciate what I had. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did and why it was wrong. You deserved so much better than how I treated you. I also want to apologize for the legal harassment, the accusations, the showing up at your work. You were right. I was being paranoid and vindictive. The house problems were just bad luck, not some revenge plot. I know that now. I hope you're happy. From what I hear, you're thriving as a teacher. You have a beautiful home. You're building a good life. That's more than I can say for myself, but maybe that's appropriate. I'm sorry for everything. I wish I could go back and make different choices, but since I can't, all I can do is learn from my mistakes and try to be better going forward. Nathaniel. I read the letter twice, then set it down and stared out my kitchen window at my garden. The fall colors were magnificent. Gold and red and orange, all the trees transformed. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated by his apology, by his admission that he'd been wrong about everything. Part of me wanted to gloat. But mostly I just felt tired. Revenge had been satisfying in the moment, but it didn't actually change anything fundamental. It didn't erase the betrayal or the pain or the year of my life I'd spent planning his downfall. It just created a different kind of ending, one where he suffered too. Was that justice? Maybe. Was it healing? Not really. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer, unsure whether I'd ever respond. What would I say? Apology accepted? I forgive you? I deliberately let you buy a house with foundation problems as revenge? None of those felt right. Maybe some things didn't need a response. Maybe some chapters of life just ended without closure, or resolution, or tidy lessons learned. That evening, I sat on my deck with wine and watched the sun set through my trees. My garden was entering dormancy again, preparing for winter. The fountain still ran, though I'd need to winterize it soon. Everything cycled. Growth and dormancy, bloom and decay, endings and beginnings. My marriage had ended. My revenge had succeeded. My new life had begun. What came next was up to me. November arrived with early snow and the kind of crisp cold that made everything feel clean and new. My students were deep into a genetics unit, and I'd introduced a project where they traced inherited traits through their family trees. One student, a quiet girl named Sophie, stayed after class one day. Miss Winters, can I ask you something personal? You can ask. I might not answer, but you can ask. Someone said you got divorced last year. Is that true? Yes. Was it hard? Very hard. Why are you asking? She looked down at her backpack. My parents are getting divorced. It's been really bad. They fight all the time. They both want me to take sides, and I don't know how to deal with it. I gestured for her to sit down. I'm sorry you're going through that. It's not fair to put a kid in the middle of adult problems. How did you deal with it? The divorce, I mean. I focused on what I could control. I couldn't control what my ex-husband did or how he felt, but I could control my own reactions, my own choices, my own future. But weren't you angry? Furious, but I didn't let the anger control me. I used it as fuel to build something better. Like this job? Coming back to teaching? Exactly. I'd given up teaching when I got married. Getting divorced forced me to reclaim that part of myself. In a weird way, the worst thing that happened to me led to some of the best changes. She nodded slowly. So it gets better? It gets different. Better is up to you and the choices you make. But yes, it can definitely get better. After she left, I thought about my own advice. It had gotten better, undeniably. My life now was fuller and more authentic than my married life had ever been. But had I made choices that I was proud of? Or had I just become a different kind of trapped? Trapped in bitterness and revenge instead of trapped in a bad marriage? The question bothered me through the rest of the day. That evening, I pulled out Nathaniel's letter and read it again. Then I pulled out a piece of paper and started writing. Nathaniel, I received your letter and your apology. I appreciate the honesty, even if it comes too late to change anything. You asked in your letter whether I've found happiness. The answer is complicated. I've found peace, independence, and purpose. I've rebuilt my life in ways that feel authentic and meaningful. But happiness? I'm still working on that. The truth is, I spent a year being angry, planning revenge, watching you struggle, taking satisfaction in your misfortunes. It felt justified at the time. You hurt me, so I hurt you back. Balance restored. But revenge doesn't actually heal anything. It just creates a different kind of wound, and I'm tired of carrying wounds. So here's what I'll say. I accept your apology. Not because you necessarily deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. Holding on to anger and resentment only hurts me at this point. I don't want us to be friends. I don't want to have any kind of relationship. But I also don't want to spend any more energy being angry at you or satisfied by your struggles. You're just a person who made bad choices, like we all do sometimes. I hope you figure out how to be better. I hope Vanessa finds whatever she's looking for. I hope the students and patients you work with benefit from whatever growth you've managed. And I hope you leave me alone to live my life without any further drama or complications. Good luck with everything. Camila first sealed the letter before I could overthink it and dropped it in the mail the next morning. Whether he'd receive it as the closure he needed or as a final rejection wasn't my concern. I'd said what I needed to say. The week after Thanksgiving, I got a call from Tyler. Remember that house next door I mentioned? The one that's for sale? Vaguely. Well, it just went under contract. I thought you'd want to know. Why would I care? The buyer is a single mother with 2 kids, teacher at the elementary school. I did her financing, and she seems really nice. I think you'd like having her as a neighbor. A teacher. A single mother. Someone who'd probably appreciate a quiet neighborhood and good schools. That's great, Tyler. Thanks for letting me know. I also wanted to tell you, I've been telling your story, not with names, but the general idea. Successful divorce recovery, smart financial planning, rebuilding after a major life change. You've inspired several of my clients to think more strategically about their own situations. I'm not sure I'm particularly inspirational. You survived something terrible and came out stronger. That's the definition of inspirational. After hanging up, I thought about his words. Had I come out stronger, or just harder? Maybe both. Maybe that was okay. December brought the usual holiday chaos, students distracted by winter break, faculty parties, end-of-semester grading. I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction from the season's forced cheer and mandatory family gatherings. Harper insisted I come to Christmas dinner again. You can't spend another Christmas alone, she said. It's depressing. It's peaceful. There's a difference. Please, the kids keep asking about Aunt Camila. So I went, bringing expensive wine and gifts for the children. Harper's house was warm and loud and full of the kind of comfortable chaos that comes from people who actually like each other. I helped with cooking, played with the kids, made conversation with Kyle's relatives. It was nice. But by 9 p.m., I was ready to leave, overwhelmed by the noise and the expectations and the effort of being social. You okay? Harper asked as she walked me to my car. Just tired. I'm not used to this much family interaction anymore. You could be, you know, if you wanted to date, meet someone new. Harper, I love you, but please stop trying to set me up. I'm genuinely happy alone. I just worry you're isolating yourself. I'm not isolating. I have you, I have my students, I have colleagues in book club and volunteering. I have plenty of social connection. I just don't need romantic connection right now. She hugged me goodbye, still looking worried, but she let it drop. Driving home through streets decorated with lights and holiday cheer, I thought about what I'd said. Was I happy alone? Or was I just comfortable with it? The distinction mattered. I'd spent a year proving I didn't need Nathaniel, didn't need a husband, didn't need anyone to be complete. And I'd succeeded. But somewhere in all that proving, had I closed myself off to the possibility of genuine connection with someone new? Maybe. But maybe that was okay for now. Maybe I needed time to just be alone, to be complete in myself, before I could even consider letting someone else in. Or maybe I was making excuses. Maybe I was so scarred by betrayal that I'd never trust anyone again. I didn't have answers. I just had questions and wine and a beautiful, quiet house waiting for me. On New Year's Eve, I stayed home alone, refusing all of Harper's invitations to parties and gatherings. At midnight, I stood on my deck watching fireworks in the distance, listening to neighbors cheering and celebrating. Happy New Year, I said to no one in particular. The year ahead stretched out unknown and full of possibility. New students to teach, new projects in my garden, new books to read, new experiences waiting to unfold. No husband to accommodate, no marriage to maintain, no image to project. Just me and whatever I chose to build. That was freedom. Messy, uncertain, sometimes lonely freedom, but freedom nonetheless. Spring arrived again, my second spring in this house, and with it came a sense of renewal, I hadn't expected. My garden burst into life with the bulbs I'd planted the previous fall. Hundreds of daffodils and tulips transforming the space into a riot of color. My new neighbor, the single mother Tyler had mentioned, introduced herself one Saturday morning while I was working in the front yard. "Hi, I'm Jessica. We moved in next door last month. Camila. Welcome to the neighborhood. Your garden is gorgeous. I have no idea what I'm doing with mine. If you want help, I'm happy to give advice." We fell into conversation about plants and schools and the challenges of maintaining houses as single women. She was warm and funny and refreshingly straightforward about her own divorce. "My ex-husband thinks I'm crazy for buying a house on my own," she said. "He keeps waiting for me to fail and have to ask him for help." So don't fail. Spite is an excellent motivator. She laughed. "I like you. We should have coffee sometime." I'd like that. It was the first new friendship I'd made since the divorce, and it felt surprisingly good. Not because I was lonely, but because it was a connection based on who I actually was, rather than who I needed to be for someone else's sake. At school, my sophomore students were finishing their genetics project. One student, Emma, the one who'd called me a cool teacher, presented her family tree and traced a history of creative talent through multiple generations. "My mom says I should study art in college, but my dad says that's not practical," she explained. "He wants me to be a doctor or lawyer." "What do you want?" I asked. "I want to do something I love, but I also don't want to struggle financially." Those don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can be smart about how you pursue your passions. Is that what you did when you came back to teaching? In a way, I'd given up teaching for reasons that seemed good at the time. Coming back meant reclaiming something I loved, but I did it strategically. Made sure I was financially stable first, planned carefully, didn't jump without a safety net. So you can follow your dreams if you're smart about it? Exactly. Dreams plus planning equals possibility. After class, I thought about that phrase. Dreams plus planning equals possibility. That's what I'd done, really. Not just with revenge, but with rebuilding my entire life. I dreamed of independence and created a plan to achieve it. I dreamed of meaningful work and planned my return to teaching. I dreamed of a beautiful home and planned how to afford it. Planning had been my superpower all along. Not the revenge itself, but the ability to see multiple steps ahead and position myself for success. In late April, I received an unexpected letter from Vanessa. The return address was somewhere in Texas. "Camila, I know you probably don't want to hear from me any more than you wanted to hear from Nathaniel, but I wanted to send this anyway, even if you throw it away without reading. I'm in therapy now, working through my own issues. My therapist asked me to write letters to people I've hurt, taking responsibility without asking for anything in return. What I did to you was unconscionable, not just the affair, but the way I acted after. Moving into your house, redecorating your life, sending you that horrible text on Christmas. I was so wrapped up in my own drama that I never stopped to think about you as a real person, with real feelings. I told myself I was in love, that love justified everything. But really, I was just young and stupid and flattered that a successful older man wanted me. I thought dating a doctor meant I'd made it, proved something to everyone who'd written me off as just a pretty face. Instead, I learned that relationships built on betrayal are poison from the start. Nathaniel and I couldn't trust each other because we'd proven to each other that we couldn't be trusted. Every argument, every financial stress, every moment of difficulty just reminded us that we'd started with a lie. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just saying I'm sorry and I understand what I did was wrong. You deserved better from both of us. I hope you're happy. I hope your life is everything you want it to be. And I hope you can eventually forgive yourself for whatever you think you did wrong, because none of this was your fault. Vanessa, I read the letter in my garden, sitting on the bench beneath my Japanese maple. Birds sang overhead and the fountain burbled peacefully nearby. Forgive myself? For what? For the revenge I'd planned? For the foundation issues I'd hidden? For taking satisfaction in their suffering? Maybe. Or maybe I just needed to accept that I'd done what I'd felt I needed to do at the time, and that was okay. Not perfect, not admirable, but okay. I folded Vanessa's letter and put it with Nathaniel's in a box in my office, not to reread or dwell on, but just to have evidence that they'd both eventually recognized what they'd done. That evening, I made myself dinner and ate on my deck, watching the sun set through new leaves on the trees. My second spring in this house, my second year in this life, I'd built from scratch. It was a good life, not perfect. I was still figuring out the balance between independence and isolation, between self-protection and openness to new experiences. But it was mine, and that mattered more than I'd ever realized it could. My phone rang. Harper. Kyle and I are thinking about having a game night next weekend. Board games, pizza, totally casual. Wanna come? A year ago, I would have said no automatically. Too much effort, too much socializing, too much risk of uncomfortable questions. But now? Sure, that sounds fun. Really? You're not just saying that to be nice? Really, I could use more casual fun in my life. Great, I'm so glad. And Cam? Yeah? I'm really proud of how you've rebuilt, not just the practical stuff, but the emotional work. You seem more like yourself than you have in years. Thanks, that means a lot. After hanging up, I realized she was right. I did feel more like myself. Whoever that self was. Not the woman who'd sacrificed everything for her husband's career. Not the woman consumed by planning revenge, but someone in between, someone learning to be both strong and open, both independent and connected. It was a work in progress, but so was everything worth building. Epilogue. 2 years later, I stood in my classroom, preparing for the first day of my third full year at Lincoln High, when Dr. Martinez knocked on my door. "Got a minute?" she asked. Of course. She came in and closed the door behind her. "I wanted to talk to you about something. The district is looking to expand our STEM program, and they want to create a position for someone to coordinate interdisciplinary science education. I immediately thought of you." "What would that involve?" "Teaching part-time, developing curriculum, mentoring new teachers, working with the district to implement best practices. It's more money, more influence, more opportunity to make a real impact." "I'd need to think about it." "Of course. But Camila, you're exactly what this program needs. You're an excellent teacher, you understand education theory, and you have real-world experience that makes you relatable to students and teachers. You'd be perfect." After she left, I sat at my desk and thought about the offer. More responsibility, more visibility, more opportunity to shape education beyond just my own classroom. A year ago, I would have said no automatically. Too much, too fast, too risky. But now, I was genuinely interested. That weekend, I hosted a small dinner party, the first I'd thrown since my divorce. Harper and Kyle, Jessica from next door and her sister, a few colleagues from school. Simple food, good wine, easy conversation. "Your garden is unbelievable," Harper said, standing on the deck after dinner. "I can't believe this is the same space from 2 years ago. It's amazing what you can grow with time and attention." I'm not just talking about the garden. I knew she wasn't. She was talking about me, about the life I'd built, about how I'd transformed from the devastated woman who'd lost everything in a divorce to someone stable and successful and genuinely content. "I had good fertilizer," I said with a smile. "Rage and determination make excellent plant food." She laughed. "I'm glad you can joke about it now." "It's been over 2 years. If I couldn't joke about it by now, I'd need therapy." "Do you ever think about him? About what happened?" "Sometimes. Usually when I'm reminded, like receiving those letters last year. But it's getting more distant, like something that happened to someone else." "And the revenge? The foundation thing you told me about?" I'd eventually confessed everything to Harper. The hidden inspection report, the deliberate concealment, the satisfaction I'd taken in watching Nathaniel struggle. She'd been shocked, but also grudgingly impressed. "I don't regret it," I said honestly. "Maybe I should, but I don't. He took something from me and I took something from him. The scales balanced. And now? Now I'm just living my life. The revenge is done. The anger is mostly gone. I'm just here, present, building something new instead of tearing down something old." Later that night, after everyone had left and I was cleaning up, I stood in my kitchen and looked around at my home. The house Nathaniel had wanted, that I'd bought instead. The space I'd filled with my own choices, my own style, my own life. Was buying this house revenge? Absolutely. Was I glad I'd done it? Also absolutely. But it had become more than revenge. It had become home, Real home, the first place that had ever been entirely mine. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica next door. "Thanks for tonight. Your friends are great. Let's do it again soon." I smiled and typed back, "Definitely. I'm thinking monthly dinner club. You in?" 100% in. Building community. That's what I was doing now. Not just surviving or getting revenge or proving points, but actually building connections and relationships and a life that felt sustainable. The teaching position Dr. Martinez had mentioned kept tugging at my mind. It represented growth, opportunity, a chance to have broader impact. It was scary in the way good opportunities often are, requiring risk and effort and belief in myself. But I'd taken risks before. I'd left a marriage, rebuilt my finances, bought a house, returned to teaching. Each risk had paid off not because they were safe, but because I'd planned carefully and believed I deserved better. Maybe it was time for another risk, a different kind this time, not driven by revenge or necessity, but by genuine desire for growth. On Monday, I told Dr. Martinez I was interested in the position. By Friday, I was formally applying. By the end of September, I'd accepted the role. Half-time teaching, half-time coordinating the STEM program. It meant more responsibility, more visibility, more chances to fail publicly. But it also meant more opportunity to shape education, mentor new teachers, make a real difference beyond just my own classroom. I was ready for it. That evening, I sat on my deck with wine and watched the autumn sunset paint my garden in gold and amber light. Everything I'd planted over 2 years was mature now, established, thriving with minimal intervention. Like me, I realized. I'd been replanted after my marriage ended, had struggled to establish roots in new soil, had spent energy building strength and stability. Now I was thriving, ready to grow in new directions. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered. "Camila?" "It's Nathaniel." My stomach clenched reflexively, even though he hadn't called in over a year. "Why are you calling?" "I wanted to let you know, I'm moving. Out of state, new job opportunity, fresh start." "Okay, I'm not sure why you're telling me this." "Because I wanted to say goodbye, and thank you." "Thank you? For what?" "For being strong enough to leave, for showing me that I needed to change. I know that sounds strange, but watching you rebuild your life, while mine fell apart, it forced me to take a hard look at myself." "Nathaniel, I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that your strength made me want to be stronger. Your independence made me realize how dependent I'd been on external validation. You taught me more in the aftermath of our divorce than I learned in 15 years of marriage." I didn't know what to say to that. "I hope your fresh start works out." "Thanks. I hope you're happy, Camila. Really happy, not just successfully surviving." "I'm getting there." "Good. That's what you deserve." After hanging up, I sat with the conversation, trying to understand how I felt. Not triumphant, his redemption or growth didn't validate my revenge. Not vindicated, his apology didn't erase what he'd done. Just complete. Like a circle had closed, a story had ended, and we were both free to write new chapters that had nothing to do with each other. The sun finished setting, and stars appeared in the darkening sky. My garden fell into peaceful shadow, the fountain's sound becoming more prominent in the evening quiet. I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago, trapped in a dying marriage, invisible in her own life, believing that her worth came from supporting someone else's dreams. That woman had been humiliated in a courtroom, told she deserved nothing, forced to start over with nothing but rage and determination. And she'd turned that rage into strategy, that determination into rebuilding, and had created a life richer and more authentic than the one she'd lost. Was it perfect? No. I still had moments of loneliness, still struggled with trust, still sometimes felt the ghost of that humiliation in quiet moments. But it was mine. Every choice, every achievement, every failure, all mine. Not borrowed or reflected or dependent on someone else's success. My ex-husband had taken my house in the divorce. The new owner had my last name, not because of marriage, but because I'd reclaimed my maiden name and bought something better with my own money. That wasn't just revenge. That was resurrection. And resurrection, I'd learned, was so much sweeter than revenge could ever be.